I'm ripping a Phoenix. Ready to shoot. They're gonna land. They're landing on the big building.
Alb, you know our teammates is random, right?
Oh, Ray, you're right. I forgot I wasn't here. I'm a fucking idiot.
I got you, dude. I got one. I cracked one.
Oh!
I got two. I cracked two.
No.
Fuck yeah, dude.
I forgot.
Imagine,
What are the odds? I take both my hands off keyboard and mouse and I start unscrewing the cap on my soda, dude, and they start shooting.
Imagine Mac dies and he starts yelling at me. What the fuck are you doing, RPR? What the fuck? I'm over here eating my food, man.
You want to play one more, bro?
Nah, I'm in. I'm just loading shaders, bro.
Oh, nice.
I have to load the fucking shaders for some reason. There we are. There's a new event or what? You should ask or what?
The skins are pretty horrible.
The ice
it
skin
seems
is
pretty bad.
terrible. Love that. Love that for myself. Platinum skin is dog shit. Fuck. Master's terrible.
The Mastiff actually looks really good in game.
Oh, it does?
Yeah, I actually think it's my favorite Mastiff.
It looks like the what's it called? What's the one I have on? Yeah, it looks like Tombstake, but with a little extra bottom on.
Yeah, I
little
swear to
more
God,
ass.
it hits harder.
It is hard.
It does more damage or what?
I swear to God.
Damn.
That bitch be two-tapping people.
Well, I'm in, man. If you wanna, whenever you want.
Go. No.
Let me put this shit away. I can't even eat anymore. Wait a minute.
I gotta change the shorts also. I'm fucking my ass is sweating. Dude, this soda's ass.
Oh, this is the bug. We're gonna net.
Shut the fuck up!
Neen_mouth just resubscribed for 3 months. Congrats on qualifying. Also, my favorite is my sprinkler goes like this.
Alright, yeah, so the bug isn't fixed. Since me and Mandy just said it. So since we all just said
Yo,
it.
I got code net, dude.
Yep, that's the bug.
That's kinda cool. And what's that, 10-minute delay now or what?
No, you don't get a delay. The whole server, like, died.
Oh.
So you'll go to
That's pretty
rejoin,
cool.
it'll say could not have rejoined match, code over. And you just go back to the main menu.
What the
Oh,
fuck?
that's cool.
Yeah,
What is this?
yeah, that happened to me like five
Code
or 6
over.
times yesterday.
I got code over. Not even code net. I got code over.
Yeah.
Fuck
Yeah.
is
Code
that?
over, man. The code is gone. Hey, well, like that.
Or did the game just finished or like what? We're playing on any?
That's a bug.
Didn't
We
think for
joined
3
up,
months.
our
Welcome
screen
back.
flashed while we were going to Legend Select. Hate to see it.
Cringe. Very cringe. Very not nice. I guess that's new because I haven't experienced that in a while. Or ever.
It's just from the new patch.
Did shadow caps get buffed?
I didn't even look at the patch notes. I don't think they even buffed anything.
They said, someone said shadow caps got buffed. Shadow buffed.
Cap.
Love it. It's like 2 damage more.
Bow check
Pog,
shatter
dude.
caps are buffed.
Hey. Pog. 2 more damage, dude. Oh, 77 now. It's 20 or 2 per hit. Holy shit.
That sounds a little wild. They also buffed
What?
the G7.
Why are they buffing shit without saying shit?
They might have said it. I didn't read patch notes.
It's a, what do you mean? It's a feature, dude. It's an Easter egg. You gotta find it out yourself. If you tap 2 times in the floor with the RE45, it does twice as much damage for like 2 minutes also.
What's up, chat? Sorry, I'm all over the place today. I was buying.
Scout is
tickets
mega
and shit.
broken right now, apparently.
What? They buff its damage?
I guess.
Is there a mod here that can change the title?
About a 4-tap someone with body shots or what?
Hopefully not. There's a bow right there.
Ooh, I got a wingman. I'm
Here, Mande,
happy.
take the bow.
Oh.
We
Seriously?
contested? We're not contested.
I don't think so, no.
No, thought I saw a team. Yeah,
Oh,
there you
right,
go. Right there.
Why the fuck are they landing here? This whole middle is open. Oh,
I don't
they're
know.
pushing
They're
at me.
running up the ramp here on you.
He's in this bin, on this bin. Nice
32
nade from
white.
him.
He's shooting me.
Throwing 9 nades at me.
Valky's purple.
60 on this guy. 100. Dead. 60 on Valk.
Not cracked.
Knocked.
Revenant player? The fuck am I playing?
I don't know what's wrong with them.
On that. Ow. 40 what?
She turned around after she saw me, dude. Oh, this way, this way, this way. They're fighting gardens right now.
They're fighting guns, you said?
Gardens.
Alright, what's up, chat? Sorry, I know I just jumped into ranked and I just started a stream. I'm all over the place today. I'm literally all over the place, but I wanted to stream a little bit. I just wanted to stream a little bit, even though I'm all over the place. Huh? Heck yeah.
Oh, lucky.
I'm fucking dead, bro.
60 crate.
I was talking to my fucking mom.
Knocked one. You're not dead, don't worry about it.
I don't know how that guy didn't fucking
There.
kill me.
Yeah, I cracked them.
At him 30.
I cracked one in there. At the door.
I just got stuck.
Pushing you. Cracked the guy on you. Great.
He's literally right.
Cool.
All dead.
He had 2 prowlers.
That was a control player. Oh, R9 there, you know. No more fucking.
Yeah,
You don't need a blue bolt?
yeah, I'll take it.
Yeah, this guy had 400 light, dude. He was there.
Yo, I can change the title to rank.
Damn.
Can you show now? Okay, 1 second. I'm all over the place, shit. I need to figure out where the fuck I am. I just started the stream without thinking. No cap.
Oh, next to me.
Alright, be my dog.
And up top as well.
Can you, I don't know, fuck it.
I'm dumb.
I'm just down.
Oh, alright.
It's fine. Anyone have big meds? Phoenix or something?
Bad
I don't
down.
know happening.
Look at that.
I got in on that window, purple. Oh, I got a medkit.
One guy on a heady in the back.
Oh, you got it?
I did. These guys are playing on 500 ping. I just died behind the whole wall.
Oh yeah, they are.
Trust me, high up.
Alright, I died.
Oh, that's line.
They're trying
They're
to raise.
raising.
1v1 right now, Mande.
Third party coming in from west. Third party coming in from west. Blow down.
They're trying to portal out.
Fuck him.
Another. Is this another third party flying in? No, that's the third. It has to be the third.
Nothing wrong. I'll just let them fight.
I'm gonna crawl to fucking. I'm gonna be free to res in a sec here. No cap.
Yeah, I'm running the other way around.
I'm almost over the bridge. And then I'm free.
I'm queuing, so if they scan, they can't see me.
Yeah, I'm good here.
Now that was pretty cool.
Yeah, that's pretty nice.
Yeah.
That was nice fighting that guy with 400 ping.
What weapons did you have? Help.
Car Eva.
We should third that. I'm gonna plug him and then we third, okay?
I'll take it in, if it's okay.
Yeah, that's cool.
I'll take your car for a second.
Beep it.
One bad, no cell.
I don't see them.
They fucking padded out.
What the fuck? Are they just duo? They have to be.
Yeah. That was very
Going all the way
unlucky.
there. No, that's 3, right?
No, duo.
Oh yeah, they wanna go res and drift that place.
I have no health meds.
Me, I have 4 syringes.
Alright.
There's 2 syringes on the ground here. They're going to the car. This person's dead. Third party Andy's running away. Let's
Damn.
go. Alright, none.
Fuck it. I'm staying here. I'm going to craft. Holy fuck, dude.
I'm kidding.
Yeah, I'm not. I gotta go loot some. Jesus Christ. Alright, there's some juice here. What's up, chat? I know I started late today, but I had to take care of like stuff like plane tickets and shit like that, and like just details for the land, because we're booking everything. But and like some bootcamp shit. But yeah, I'll be back to normal schedule soon. Tomorrow we're starting really early because the Souls tournament. Yo, when does the Souls tournament start tomorrow? Is it like 10 AM, Mande?
Dude, why do you ask me?
I don't know. I thought
I didn't
you
know what day
fucking
it
know
is today.
something, dude.
No,
Really?
I didn't know what day it is.
Fuck, man. When does it start?
I don't know.
I need to know because I need to fucking wake up.
Yeah.
6 PM GST, that should be 10 AM. If I'm right.
It's like 3
10
or
a.m.?
4 a.m. for us.
Okay. Yeah, it should be 10 AM for us. No, Randy, we don't know where we're going yet. Also, NK.
You know, I've gotten shit for saying this, but you guys agree, right? Like, Crypto's heirloom is kind of ass.
Yeah, it's pretty bad.
All the heirlooms are pretty bad in my opinion. Except for like 3.
Yeah.
Like, that shit actually looks like a foam sword.
Alright, it's like a toy sword.
Yeah, it's pretty boring.
The third person animations are pretty cool though. I'll give it that.
The only good heirlooms are Gibby, Raid, Bloodhound, Bangalore. That's about it.
I put Lifelines above Bangalore's.
I don't like Lifeline's heirloom. Just 2 sticks. What the fuck is that?
The bopping sticks, bro.
I don't know. I don't like them. Never liked them. And I was a Lifeline man before.
They have a good spam too.
Oh, like where you like play the drums and shit in there?
Yeah, yeah.
Nah, I don't know. Did you guys see Valk's what's it called? Valk's leaked heirloom?
Yeah,
that's
that's
pretty
interesting.
It could be kind of crazy.
It's
But,
cool, but
yeah.
kind of big for my liking. In here. I'm going down.
I'm shooting
Love
more.
it.
I hit the Octane for 70.
There's no shot, dude.
Valk
You're
90.
cracked at the wazoo, Mr. Mando.
About 90 red on Valk. Manda's in a fucking... Yep.
Uh-oh.
Octane almost cracked. Valk cracked on you.
I-
I'm batting.
Alright.
Sure.
Was he? Oh, he's inside the
Like-
fucking thing. He's playing
They're trying
knockdown.
to finish one guy.
I'm off the scene. He's spinning me in the air.
I gotta go.
Yeah, same.
I might be dead here. No, how are they so close already? Dude, how are they just doing that? Like they're
They're
just
crazy,
finishing
dude.
that guy in the fucking in the booth, dude. We're not killing anyone. What the fuck? What's up, ZT?
I don't understand. I'll just be honest with you.
What's the alpha man?
I don't understand how they fucking know. I'm just like, I'm sitting in the most rat spot in the world and I don't have Bloodhound or nothing at all. And dude, I would never in my entire life ever have looked there. Holy shit, dude. That's crazy.
Kumba, Spear. How are you? Morning, Lumina. So what's the verdict on the whole fucking Sen situation with the out of bounds bullshit?
I doubt that Scry will lose points for that.
I didn't look into the situation, I just saw a little bit about it.
You know the spot by, like, you know where it happened, right?
No, that's why I didn't actually.
So it's
look
at
into it.
Thermal. You know, like the west, like the southwest, like edge of Thermal. Not the low ground where you can play, but like by the 2-story building where you can peek and see that safe spot on the west edge.
Okay.
There's like a small rock that's out of bounds there, and Ganjmo is just jumping on it, shooting, going back in.
Oh, he's
Just doing that
jumping
till
on
the
it.
team goes in the corner.
He's jumping on it with no abilities, just jumping on it.
He's Valk. So he'd jump on it, shoot, and then go back.
That could be illegal. Using jetpack to get out of bounds, keep resetting it. That could be illegal. If he's doing it by himself,
He didn't get any kills,
True.
but he was bullying the team that was in the corner with it.
He did cause their death, right?
Don't know if he got them killed, but he definitely shredded their shield economy.
Yeah. The thing is, we play as well. A lot of hackers pick a lot of spell on that spot. I think if you get to that spot and you keep resetting the timer and you can get to that spot by, you know, just climbing up and walking, then it's fine. But if you're using a jetpack to fly up that spot and keep resetting the timer, then how is that different from Pathfinder queuing up there? You know? Then it's the same shit. And people lost tournaments before for Pathfinder queue resetting timers. Should be consistent in that. That's my stance.
I don't know. I don't think that they'll get punished for it. Harshly, at least.
No, I don't think so either.
People would be... I mean, like...
Well, you're not allowed to reset the timer to begin with.
I know. I think some people would be understanding and be like, okay, I mean, they did literally break a rule. But then other people would be like, okay, dude. They're just stealing their land spot, the only non-signed team.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know as far as going, you know, for a DQ there, but definitely talk with them and be like, yo, you can't do that, you know?
Yeah.
If they do that to me online, I'm fucking
Right on here. This guy over, look at you guys. They have a 30. 42.
He's running underground towards you, Mande. I cracked him.
Is he fucking alone?
No, they're sitting with fucking rampart walls on me and shit.
What the fuck?
Okay.
I have a
Okay,
ton
I'm
of
doing it.
grenades.
I'm doing it.
I have no.
I'm doing one guy. Knocked one. Fuck, dude. And you trying to finish me. Dude, little rat, dude. Look at this fucking rat right here.
Yeah, so
Oh my god.
I think,
Blue on the
you know,
flag,
the thing is you don't make them DQ, but like people have before have lost their entire fucking games points for doing shit like that, you know?
yeah, if they do that, though, that would be what makes a difference between Sen taking their spot or not.
I
That's
see.
the problem.
Yeah, because
I think. I'm
I
pretty
wouldn't
sure.
I wouldn't straight up DQ them from the tournament, but I think the points distribution should be, you know, affected by them abusing the bug. Because I've seen teams do that and lose their entire game and get put on 20th place. So I mean, if they're gonna be, you know, I'm not saying to do it, but I'm just saying LGS needs to be consistent with their shit, you know. Are you doing it or you're not doing? Because if you don't do it and you did it to other teams, then you're not being fair to those teams that you did it before.
I have no shells, no bats, by the way. Yeah.
Here's 3 cells.
There's 4 cells in the bot.
I'm 1-4 now.
Purple sock there on the ground.
Oh my god, I'm juiced now.
What's up, Kud? I'm doing good, how are you? Obviously, figuring out this is really important before LAN, because if someone does that shit on me, to me online and I lose a game because of it, I'm going straight to the admins. I don't give a fuck.
I'm throwing hands, dude.
That'd be the fight that we were talking about, Mande.
Dude, no, but like, the thing
RPI is
is,
jumping on them.
the thing is, if somebody does it, right? And then you're like, oh, you take the points away from them. What about all the points we would potentially
Yeah, you would have gotten.
That didn't
Like,
happen.
that's fucking ass. Like,
No,
could
you can't like.
You could lose qualification to finals because of that, because someone abused that spot.
I don't know.
I'm sure screaming, bro, online if that happens.
Over here.
Or-
RPI, I have a very important question.
What?
Are you gonna rip a jersey to LAN or the maid outfit?
Maid outfit.
I'm doing the jersey, dude.
You're
No
you're
way
a
I'm
pussy
doing
if you do the maid outfit.
Motherfucker, do you think that shit's comfortable to sit in?
Dude,
Cringe.
fuck comfort. It's about making a statement, bro.
Yeah, making a statement.
Imagine you win and you go out on stage and lift up the trophy in the maid outfit. Dude,
By the way, that maid
That's
outfit
huge.
ripped, bro. That
that
maid
is
outfit.
actually alpha.
That maid outfit is gone, dude. I fucking ripped it when I took it off.
No shot.
That shit's so fragile. All the fucking stockings and shit ripped. Everything fucked.
Even better, buy a new one and when you lift the trophy, that bitch will bust off you.
Yeah, dude, your entire cock is out. Oh my god, dude. Imagine everyone will be talking about you.
I don't think that's the
Did you
kind
guys
of
see the guy that
attention I
won the
want.
tournament? Yeah, dude, his juicer is massive, dude. Holy shit.
Oh yeah. Wait, I just
That was
saw
kinda
him.
cool.
Just playing on the wall.
Cracked him, blood on.
Dude, I
He's
just
right here.
can't see him fucking run after these guys.
Why are we like just constantly running back and forth? Like I'm so tired.
Alright,
of
dude,
it.
fuck it. I'm popping my bat.
You got wide left. 2 guys
Yeah.
wide left. That's a solo. Wait, that's a whole team over there. What the fuck?
That is. Isn't there a blood on
You take
below
your
us?
portal back.
Sears
Take it
fucking
back.
shit on.
Try to get
Take it
over
back.
these guys in the rock. I give you over
100 on Loba.
Crack Loba. Gonna hit bomb, I give you up.
Loba cracked again. She's shit on here.
I'm running forward.
I'll go more.
Oh, my ass. Hello?
I'll go more. Wait,
They
what's
have,
happening?
Lobo over here. He's running.
They have what's it called?
No, it's still a Lobo right there. He's up.
Oh, he's up.
The Bloodhound is on the way there.
40,
Yeah,
50
the
gold
from
on
the
him.
other team.
How is that not hitting him? Oh, he's dead. Ah, 25 flash on him. In the Loba.
Stun.
I got like no ammo. Behind us, someone's rolling up behind me. Octane, he's getting a fucking banner.
Get him. Queuing so I don't fucking die.
He's in front of me. Blue armor.
You wanna turn around and fight these guys or what?
We can, yeah.
I'm down.
I'm like low on
Come on.
ammo. I'm like have 100 bullets. Let me see if there's any here.
For light or what?
Light, yeah.
Deployed on the left.
Oh, he's already fucking close, dude. Look at this monkey.
I hit Ash 2 times.
That's very low. Oh, that's
Tethered
perfect,
him,
that's
keep off the
perfect.
bat.
Oh, that's disgusting. Oh, give me big low. Give me fucking low.
Raid almost cracked, hit 70.
I accidentally got in their portal. Not gonna lie.
Raid cracked.
I'm coming now. I'm taking it with you. I'll...
Do it. Use me, Mande.
I can't
Oh, just
take it
shit on
with you.
him.
I got him. Yeah.
That's
Nice.
That shit disappears so
Big time.
fast. Oh, finally some fucking ammo and bats. Holy shit.
There's a lot of ammo here too. And a lot of bats. Extra if you need.
Extra. One extra. I dropped Mastiff Go Wingman, dude. Of course. Oh, he's the bitch.
Oh, have you seen the new Mastiff in game yet?
No, I haven't.
No, take a peek.
I want to see it too.
Holy shit, it's chunky, dude.
Can I see?
Above us, right? No, I'm smoking. I'm smoking.
Nah, it's not that chunky.
Oh,
That's
if
pretty
you,
good.
If you don't ADS, it's chunky, isn't it?
No.
Looks chunky to me. It's like you have a canyon in your hand. Kinda reminds me of a
Cannon?
Charlie rifle.
I swear to God, it hits harder.
Does it?
This bitch is sturdy.
Damn.
Damn.
Might have
Maybe
to
it just
do it.
shoots harder also. The bigger bullets also.
Absolutely.
What if that was the thing in the game? What if they made it so, you know, like R9 has like pay to
I
win or
also-
something?
Oh, that's
I'm bad.
50
You
blue
don't
on,
care.
on blood on.
Show half of mine here right here.
Blood on.
Yeah, I'll be right there.
You got it.
Blood on's fucking blue armor.
There's a triple right here.
Popping her fucking shit it on.
Looking about. Guns down for 30.
They're pushing, they're pushing.
I'm on the roof. $66 on Wraith.
Blood sliding at me.
110 on this guy.
Blood dead.
Full 0-1. Full 0-1. Full 0-1. I'm pushing.
Looking
Pass
about.
one shot.
What kind of one shot are you speaking about?
Pathfinder. Pathfinder one shot.
My
said
fucking
one.
ass, dude. I did
Yeah.
150 on him.
Nah,
dude.
I did 130 on Wraith. They popped the bats, both of them.
When did they ping it at you?
Don't worry, I don't lie.
I'm from EU, and here Americans are known as really bad in world geography. How do you feel about that? That is absolutely true.
That's true. I watched the video before we started playing also. That was a very good video. They were talking about the doors and wheels debate. And these two Americans were mega stunned by the fact that houses have doors. And cars have doors. Yeah, it was
Wait,
insane.
what?
Yeah.
What?
You never heard about the debate? Are there more doors or are there more wheels in the world?
probably doors, right?
I don't think so.
I think it's more wheels.
Yeah, 100%.
I think it's also wheels.
Why?
Look here. Look here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Wheels right there.
Okay,
These
but
cabinets to roll out and back again have wheels too.
are you talking about that way? Like every little wheel in the
Like-
world?
Yeah, and every single door in the world.
I was thinking more like fucking wheels as
Our
in
wheel.
car wheel, yeah.
Cars? Oh, nah, just like
I
general.
mean, they count too, but
Yeah.
But wouldn't little cabinets also be doors?
that's true.
Cabinet doors, yeah, but one cabinet door for 4 wheels on it. Then you out.
But
you
what if a
outrolled it.
cabinet door has like 2 of those? One opening left, one opening right. Isn't that 2 doors then?
Yeah, but there's still more wheels on it. Now.
I feel like we need this statistic check.
True.
What if I flush on a path? I mean, he's shitted on. Knocked.
Alright, I'm coming
knocked
through.
him.
I'm coming through. I'm gonna ping you up, Alb.
Do it.
They're reporting
be
him
able
out
to
or
them.
some shit. The one left, I believe. Yeah, on me.
Oh, it's fucking. They're new team.
Red dead.
Oh!
Same. I'm surfing.
I fucking slammed into that wall.
Octane's running here.
About. We have a whole team on us right there.
Okay.
Okay.
Rolling up high ground.
They're fighting the other team.
They're fighting on me. Crack
What
the
are you
ball
on,
on.
right? There's also a team there.
Yeah, I think it's three teams.
2 teams, yeah.
Wraith on
Shoot
it?
here. 6-9. Nice.
They took the port that goes over here.
Oh.
What the fuck is going on?
Path cracked. Oh shit.
Path low. Blood on low. Blood on dead.
I'm in that shit, baby!
Another path hit 80.
Dead.
I got the path.
What the fuck is wrong with this? What? The grass doesn't work here.
How many paths is there,
Under the
dude?
rock.
This guy dipped.
What? Look at the grass here. It's way too high compared to where you walk. Look.
What are you smoking?
Unless I'm reps height right now.
Look at this guy.
That's actually Jordan POV.
This guy pissed.
Was he solo or
He
what?
just came out and he had like
Was that an
101 HP or something. No, it was a blood. That's very unfortunate. He just stood still when I saw him. Damn.
Below me, he just got the banner. Does he? He's running somewhere below me, Octane. He's a solo and he grabbed the banner. I imagine he's gonna go solo, right? Of course, I will be waiting for him there to end this fucking suffering.
New flatline's getting kind of sturdy too. I don't know.
Think he's cool?
It's kind of chunky. I don't know if I like it or hate it.
There he is. You're going back,
You're
you
also
saw me?
weird though.
You're going
weird,
back.
Alb.
He's going back in here.
I'm all weird, bro.
Mac,
You're pretty weird.
That's pretty true.
he might walk into you,
You're
Mac.
pretty weird when it comes to like teammates and not teammates. When it comes, it's not teammates, dude. When it comes to like
Yeah, you're pretty weird when it comes to teammates. Yeah, you're pretty weird.
when it comes to fucking weapons and shit and team comp.
Yeah, you're pretty weird when it comes to teammates, Mac.
This is true. This is true.
That's true. Imagine all the look at
Amazing
all
moment.
the people you've been teammates with. That's very cringe, dude.
TS Imperial
Imperial
Halal.
Hell, reps,
The Mazer
fucking
moment.
Mazers.
They're fighting over there at the
I'm getting a drop.
naughty boy. Holy shit.
Naughty different.
Oh, there's
I
a
can't wait to
heat
see you guys.
exchange.
It's gonna be nice. Do you want a hug when I see you?
Maybe.
Yeah, I just
maybe.
wanna
You're gonna have
ask
to
for
pick
some-
me up. You're gonna have to bend down to like pick me up. You're so fucking big, bro.
No. Come on.
You are a
I'm-
colossal unit.
I lie about my height. Everyone knows that.
No,
Yeah,
no shot.
he's like 5'6".
Where's this guy going?
I'm for 3.5, please. Thank you.
Two Octans fighting each other, man.
It's just 2 octane rats.
Yeah, they're fighting each other, chasing each other in fucking Icarus.
I'm getting involved.
I found 3 volts, dude. I'm very pissed.
They're still chasing each other. I think they're fighting
You
for a
guys can't
second.
push me. You guys can't
Dude.
push me behind.
Dude,
Nah, look at these motherfuckers both turn around. Oh my god, dude. Oh my
I
god.
didn't turn
look at
around,
that.
dude. Let's
Seriously.
make these two Octans fight each other. Like, ah shit,
Fight
he's
to death.
he's ratting on me, man.
Wait, our girl die. Please
Go,
don't.
go, go, go. Go die, RPI. Oh no. Oh no.
He can't beat
Got it.
me.
He's with our
Alright,
rat.
let's go.
I will stand here and chow you. Yo, RPI, your turn.
I cracked him. He's running to you,
He's
man.
on a heady and I just stood up on the box and chowed.
I know. And I shot him through the steps, bro.
Oh,
Dude, my
I killed
teammate
myself!
sucks.
I killed myself! Help!
Yeah.
He's cracked.
He's not cracked.
He's cracked now, almost.
No.
Almost now. He's cracked. He's cracked. He's cracked. I'm blocking him. I'm blocking him. I'm blocking him.
Dude, I didn't reload. I'm gonna lose this.
Oh no. Oh no. No!
Oh, you wanted it.
Dude, I didn't reload my guns walking in thinking he's gonna attack the storm
Hey.
and he has heat shield.
See you guys on TikTok, dude.
I literally
Almost
just started
1v3.
bunny hopping with a flat line, bro.
I threw 5 arc stars and hit myself, dude.
My teammates are trolling so much, dude.
I should have punched him back, dude. That would have been alpha. Ah. That was nice. Now I'm tired.
Take a nap.
I'm tired. Oh, dude, I'm gonna nap so much when we go to the facility.
So
No,
I'm
not. I'm
flying.
gonna stream Apex 10 hours a day. When are you going, y'all?
So I'm flying 21st, and
Yeah.
I'm flying back on the 2nd. And my flight,
Alright.
both 21st and the 2nd, are at 3 p.m. and I come home at like, I come to Stockholm at like 10 p.m. and I come home at like 10, 11 p.m.
Alright.
So yeah, the first day basically it's gonna be gone completely on traveling for me.
Yeah, I don't know. I'll just take an early flight or some shit maybe. I'll be there like early in the morning. Be all alone.
All by myself.
All by myself.
I didn't buy any of these skins, man. Let me look at this fucking piece of shit, man.
About the bow.
Oh, the bow? Man. What is that caustic skin, bro? What is that? What is that one show called Kamen Rider or whatever? What is that Horizon skin as well, bro? They need to figure it out. Oh, the Octane skin is cool though. Come on. Come on, the Octane skin is cool. Kamen Rider, Kamen Rider, I don't know who the fuck goes. Who the fuck cares, bro? That's how it looks. Ash is fired? No, I thought Ash was shit. It's Kamen Rider. Kamen. I don't even fucking care, dude. This shit's so fucking hilarious either way. I don't watch Kamen Rider, just fun. fire. I don't know. I don't like it. I think the ass skin was pretty ass in my opinion. But hey, it's all me. It's just memeing. Like the colors, I don't know.
Gentlemen, what is the vibration for food right now?
I just ate 2 burgers.
Who?
Yeah.
We talking like quarter-pound Johnsons? Or
I'm American. Hell yeah, brother.
Mandy's a little fat ass.
my brother!
Only 2 burgers?
Mandy's a little
Come on,
fat
boss.
ass.
Hey. I ate that shit when I was 7-year-old. Hey, two
but
burgers? Hell yeah, brother. You got a little bit of ranch on those?
Ranch on the burger?
Dude, give me the fucking back. Give me it back. That's mine. Oh my god, I'm jumping off that.
Do it.
How do you just come here and steal my fucking shotgun?
Here, you can have this.
Rat.
And
Oh
this.
my god. 3 timer? I'll take.
You happy now?
Yeah.
Hey. Hurry.
Oh shit.
Yo, wait, my ass is in danger!
Yeah, purple armor, you're dead in danger. Just shoot him.
Yeah, nice shot there, Albralelie. No damage call out. Now we know
I hit
him.
him 63, fuck you.
Where the fuck are they even? What do you mean hurry? I'm here.
60, 90. Oi,
on the head
110.
Oi!
There you go.
Dude, down
He's
here,
on the
down here.
ground now.
Push with me. 100 on
I'm
one
on it.
guy. Vash, Elk, Valkyrie.
Vash.
Here, Elk. Nice. Good shot, boys.
Above us, above us. I'm fighting a
dead.
controller demon, he's 1 HP.
I got 2 pops. The race has the PK.
I'm gonna fucking show this guy who's
worry
boss in
about
this gym.
Did you just call Ash Vash?
No, it was Valkyrie. I was about to say Valk, but I thought it was an Ash for a second. But
Vash.
it was a Valkyrie. Vash. Vash curry.
I'm like, who the fuck is Vash, bro? I swear to God, I sometimes wonder how we win tournaments when we can't even speak normally.
Okay, dude. That's not very nice of you, dude. I'm gonna send it. I'm gonna send
That's a
send
combo.
little GS that. That's not very nice.
Dude, I don't know
Oh,
if you ever
dude.
listened to our comms.
One
but
time hollow.
we have some of the most fucked up comms in the entire pro scene.
You
I
should
don't
hear ours.
I don't understand how
I
we.
hear yours. I just go on Reddit after, dude.
I don't understand
Yeah,
how we
full
even
recap.
understand each other sometimes.
Alp, can I fucking tell you something?
Yeah.
You're an insane player. You're crazy mechanically. Dude, you're like top tier, right?
But
Why the fuck do you call for a Valgold out of the zone, out of the place, in fucking, in the bird nest place? Why? Why the fuck did
there
you
was like-
call for a
That's
Valgold out,
surprising.
dude. There was 3 teams around us and we had no meds, and I felt very uncomfortable. And I would rather
Dude.
just go edge and just kill everyone on the edge.
Dude.
can I
Naughty
say
has
something?
2 batteries and 8 cells.
Alright, you guys have a lot of mids.
I had 3 cells.
Okay,
Yeah.
well, Naughty's not talking then.
Yeah, I had 3 cells. Zach had 2.
Yeah, Naughty's just fucking keeping them for himself.
Okay,
Oh
well,
my
he can
God.
fuck himself.
Motherfucker was carrying 2 bats and 8 cells. I was like, what the fuck are you guys talking about? And you're just like, oh, the Valgold here, and you fucking die mid thing. I was like, bro, you
Can I
guys are smoking
can I say
crack,
something?
dude.
You know that one game where you guys on Storm Point, where it's that one up the hill. You know, there's like those 2 big zip lines next to the command center, like up the that goes like up the hill, and you guys were on those blue
Yeah.
bins in the middle, like of everything. And you guys, that's when Thor walked up behind you when you were wall culting, right? They smoked you in the ass. Like, why are we wall culting there? Why are we not just walking in? The
I
zone
said
is
the
right in
same
front of
thing.
us. It's
That's
5
the
meters.
same- I said the same thing.
Nobody's literally walked it in after you guys died.
Yeah, I said the same thing.
You guys had it was such a powerful spot. I was molding when I saw you guys wall cult that. Like, there was no
Yeah.
need.
Hey, dude, can we talk about ass TPing into 3 people, bro?
Oh yeah, well I mean that's a whiff on the aim. The plan was there, the execution wasn't.
That was fun. Dude, I was so close to laughing. When you did that, I didn't want to laugh, dude. I
Dude.
held it in for so hard.
But if you
You're
saw
like-
from
you
my
were
POV
jumping,
how
I was
much
like, oh my god.
I
yeah.
did
You're a
like
better teammate than me, bro.
I did like 5 wingman shots on that Gibby dude, and I'm like I'm going in, dude. I'm fucking going in. But
Oh
to be
my
honest,
God.
if you saw it from my POV, if I placed that port just like 2 meters to the left, I would have survived.
Oh my god, dude.
Like,
That was
just a
funny as
little-
shit. I
You're,
was so close to
you're a
laughing.
better teammate than me, man, because Zach does some stupid shit and I laugh immediately.
Like,
I-
at least,
instantly.
at least you guys didn't get Fury 3 by a truck, dude.
Dude,
True.
dude,
Oh
that
my
was fucking
God.
funny.
Oh my god.
To be fair, I rarely fuck up my fucking aggressive plays like that.
Nothing will be funnier than Zach ash ulting out into storm and me just looking at him and going, what? Like, that was the first word that came out of my mouth. I looked at where he ported and just went, what? And just went back to shooting. Like,
No, but I rarely do like really bad ass shots. That was like one of the few ones that I did that fucked up the whole game. But honestly, like between me surviving there and me dying there was like a actual 2 meter distance. If I just flicked my mouse a little bit to the left, I would have killed all 3 of those guys. And let's not talk about how we fucked up that day after this. After
just
that,
wait.
everything
We'll go
went
again.
south, dude.
Yeah.
Okay, where are people, bro? Like, trying to fight people.
oh no.
I can't believe we only got 2 kills that game as well, man. They like, we were knocking people left, right, center. We only got 2 kills.
That was crazy.
That shit pissed me off so much. I think that entire Watson team, we got like 1 kill of that when we put all 3 of them on 1 HP. Whoa,
Yeah,
big lag.
I'm so pissed I didn't knock
Oh,
him.
bite man,
I
you know.
fucking... I stick him with the arc star and then he just ash ults and just fucking removes that from the game completely.
Oh yeah, that last fight, I don't know how we fucking lost that. I'm molding over that still. I walk in, I killed the Gibby before I even took a single point of damage, and we somehow like lost that fight. I full killed Gibby and I put Ash on like 90 health. Like, I thought we had the issue for sure. I don't fucking know where people are, man. What is this?
So he
People died
removed
here
Ash.
100 seconds ago, 60 seconds ago. Let's go orbital.
But you got marks, those people in Energy Depot. They're
Energy
right there. I
Depot?
think
We'll
that's a
go kill them.
lifeline.
Yes?
Someone in the chat said, play lifeline, I dare you. Oh yeah?
For the bathroom.
Oh, dude.
You double dog dare me?
I double dare you to play lifeline. You're too scared to play lifeline. Yeah.
Oh!
Shit.
If you were playing lifeline, you could heal yourself right now.
There's just a one guy. Where's his teammates?
Up there.
I betted this guy. He got me.
I think I'm obviously cheating, dude. Obviously cheating.
Kobe. Oh, what the fuck?
I'm
Jumped
feeding
on me.
him.
Yo,
Oh,
this
shit,
lifeline
I'm
is going
feeding
from
him.
corner to corner, bro. Not cool.
Good.
Lifeline shit on.
Talking about.
I good, Albert Donis.
I killed the crypto.
I'm going.
Lifeline almost cracked here behind his box. He's popping a battery. Behind a box, Mac. He popped the battery. I cracked him.
Jump, jump. Pussy. Oh, I'm scared.
I should
I'm gonna
have.
tether him. Okay, there you go.
I'm going up high ground, I'm going up high ground. So good, dude. Oh my
Oh, you got
god.
him.
Perfectly played right there. Textbook Apex Legends.
Oh yeah?
Yeah.
He's playing textbook Apex Legends, dude. Alright, shield.
That was a play straight out of Hal's Pro Guides textbook.
Did you guys pay for it? I paid for it. I paid for progress.
Cool. Why you suck still
Yeah,
then?
it's pretty good. Oh, you saw how I got top 10 most kills in this tournament? That's why.
Wow. Dude, how
Yeah,
about
I got
Spitfire
top
with
10
a
there.
3-timer, dude?
You sure it's because of that, not the charge rifle?
I didn't pick up a single charge rifle, so I don't want to hear that shit, Albralelie. Yeah.
You see, I picked up the charge rifle this season, and I didn't finish top 10. And you know what? I feel scammed.
That's what I'm saying.
Maybe you're onto something, Mandy.
You got shit on.
I
could give you. I could give you my entire Gibby guide I made. It's 20 minutes long, but
I might have to settle for yours since Hadza can't release his.
God damn, Hotzi's gatekeeping the Gibby strats, dude.
He is.
I think, as a pro player, I think it's super scary to do shit like that.
Guides?
Yeah.
That was part of why I didn't do a Pathfinder one back in the day.
Yeah,
Now
it's like
it wouldn't matter.
you do it and then people are like,
On
people
me?
just fucking shit on you.
I mean, you can bet your ass Hal got the bag though.
Oh yeah, he made like 100k at least.
I don't know about that, but
No, definitely.
Yeah, he did.
I doubt it.
Just the just the numbers.
I give you ulted his back.
Oh, dude, we're doing this then. You guys ready?
Yeah.
Take it no matter what, alright? Even if I say don't take it.
What if
Of course, I'm standing on it. I don't have a choice. They're running left. They're running left.
Great crack
One shot.
on the window.
God, I was
Dude,
so
he's
low.
tap vaping, cringe.
Yeah, he
Fucking
should be
hate
dead.
mouse and keyboard players. Oh, your mom! I stuck him.
I fried the Wraith. There's a Valk in.
He's on the stairs, isn't he?
Yeah, he is.
Bubbling through the wall for you?
Fog.
Is
Kinda
that your
good.
pog?
Kinda good.
Bubble?
What is that nade? That just fucking slid down the bubble. That's fucking
Oh
illegal.
my god, my bubble was
Nine.
actually broken.
On the roof above me.
I don't know how those headshots, but
Mandy,
I'll
if
take
I
it.
don't see you bust out one
New
of them
team,
bugs,
new team pyramid.
Triple headshot on one.
90, 120 on one.
Doesn't lie.
What is this guy healing on the door and I can't hit him? 1 HP. Got him.
Pushing. I haven't hit a single wingman shot yet, by the way.
Good.
kind of crying with the
36
spot on.
cracked one guy.
Fuck you guys. Up top, man.
Yeah.
Are they up there?
Yeah, me.
They were, yeah.
99.
Hello, my friend.
120. 5.
That guy just only jumped.
Ash ulted above us. 2, I think.
Bang.
31
50.
headshot. 45 Ash. Climbing. Rock climbing on them.
Ash cracked.
No!
There is another one.
Fucking one of them. Body headshot. Nice. Very cool.
Nice,
The
that
path
fast.
from the first team grab banners.
Fuck. Got a 0 bullet spitfire.
Ooh, that's pretty nice. Let's pick up that.
Some people shoot wingman with no recoil. Is that a shit? Nah, dude, that's
A
a
bug.
feature. It's like only good players can shoot it with no recoil.
Yeah.
That's why I did. Shoot that joint one with no recoil.
I got 0 recall on mine. It's a new cheat I found.
Dude, I just fell down the hall and still TP'd upwards through the wall. What?
Cheating, man.
To the right.
Next to me on the right.
Oh, the forklift is fucking me.
Wait, the forklift to fuck you?
Don't ask questions. you
Nine
don't
hit this
want the
guy?
answer to. Oh my god.
Oh, one's close, one's close, one's close.
Hey, 0.
I hit like 60, bro. We got that guy, dude. We're
I have to
low.
What
Oh,
guy
yeah.
close to you here? 90 on him. Here, I'll try. Peek him.
I'm gonna die. I'm gonna die.
Body, headshot.
I'll give you ult to the guys on Europe here.
Knocked one.
One's close to you, man. Here. He got 30 or some shit. What is that?
Yes, I don't know what's going on over there. Just got patted out.
45 purple on one.
There's a whole other team just brawling on our side over there.
This guy's
I'm
a
gonna pat at
Kraber
this
or what?
Kraber. Yeah, I'm patting at
No.
it. Wish me luck.
No, it's not a Kraber. It's a mini Kraber.
Peter.
Where the fuck is that guy?
Got these two around.
Oh, it is a Kraber. Give it to me!
No.
Oh my god.
Uh-oh.
I saw it
you changed,
first. I
man.
saw it first.
What do you mean? You said it's not a Kraber. You don't deserve
He's
it.
in the heat shield over there.
0 for 5.
I'm gonna be happy going 0 for 5. Oh shit! I don't have a heat shield. Never mind.
I'm gonna win the game for you.
He's got self first. Where did this team go?
Headshot, body shot.
Did they queue over?
Gonna
Yeah.
shoot through those guys now.
Dude, I'm done. Body, headshot another guy, and they're not fucking dead yet.
So kill them.
I'm trying.
Try harder.
Got a good point.
I guess I got a fucking double headshot instead of fucking only one.
You gotta put their HP on 0. That's the whole point. Not
I
on
guess.
barely, or not almost
I don't know how to
0.
do that.
Just shoot him.
Dude.
Ash, not Ash. What's she called?
What is this? This 5 minutes set is
90 right
non-existent.
here.
I can't. This guy's pestering me, dude. File a fucking report on this guy. Oh, I got third dead from the fucking ship of Icarus. Come here and res me.
Oh, it would be a shame if you accidentally got full pin on the floor, huh?
It'd be a shame if I had 0
Who's
bullets in
Valko?
my Kraber.
Oh, never mind.
They might land on your Schmeat.
I hope
One
they
dude's
do.
still here.
Pathfinder.
70 on one from Icarus. Wait, on me.
Wait, on you? What?
I just heard a guy on my left, I swear to God. Yeah. Little rat fuck, look.
Dude, how is he sliding below the juicer, dude? But wasn't there a guy in Icarus?
Oh, not a rat. It's not a rat.
No, his teammate, he probably got left, you know, behind by the Valkyrie. On me? I just heard something.
The other shit. Easy. Nice!
That's what I heard.
45 on Ash. Alright, Wraith. 45 3 times.
70 flash.
That's a lot of flash.
I can't hit him.
That's all for us.
That's that kind of thing.
What's up with everyone having good weapons?
I think he knows.
Dude, he's one shot?
Hey. 7 for 7.
If you tried to hit someone with PK for 9 and 7 on purpose, do you think you could do it?
No.
Wait,
I
what?
don't think I could
It's
do
like
it
it's
on
like
purpose.
shooting the bars in this game. It's like if you tried, you couldn't do it, but when you're aiming for someone, you'll hit them like 9 times in a row with your wingman. I need to find bubbles like I did for you guys on Stormpoint. It's so hard to find them on those buildings, so.
I already got all of them laid down.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Yeah, you got the
I'll
land
show you.
bubs.
I'll show you after land.
Okay, thank you. You'll release the Gibby guide then?
Yeah, I will. Only for you. Albralelie
Before-
Skivy guide.
Okay. Wait, it's even got my name on it, so that means I can put it on YouTube after. I'll just be
Yeah,
like, thank you to Mandy for doing the voiceover.
How
Provided-
Yeah,
close?
don't worry about it.
How close is Inferno Online to the airport?
Imagine it's in the airport.
What is the airport called? Arstadal, right?
I don't know.
Oh, it's pretty close. It's over the What is this distance from here to here? How do I fucking... How do I check this? It's a bit... That doesn't look that much, man. I'm looking at the maps. Looks like you gotta go over the river and then... You're there. Oh, it's called Arlanda. Okay, my bad. Where the fuck is Arlanda? Holy shit, where is Arlanda? Holy fuck, where is it? Bromma. Wait, that's a different airport. How many airports do they have in Stockholm? North of Stockholm? You got me fucked up. I know where I am. Sweden is so confusing.
You know, out of curiosity, because I don't see
2
a lot of,
inches.
like-
Oh,
yeah.
what? Yeah, what? No, my bad. What are you saying?
I mean, I was curious about that too. So like,
Oh,
Oh,
what?
you know, thanks for the heads up in advance.
I hear you.
No way you took that. What ping are you on? Hello? You playing from my fucking server?
Oh, I actually just got outlooted by 200 MS.
How the fuck does that even happen? How, like, that can't be real. Okay, we need to figure out if it's more worth Ubering from fucking Arlanda to Inferno, or if there's like a terrain you can take or some shit.
We'll see.
The motherfucker, I am paying 100 euros a day for fucking Uber, dude.
Wait, what do you mean a day? Aren't we close to the venue?
Me too.
Well, to the venue, but to the bootcamp we might not be.
Oh,
The bootcamp is not where the venue is.
Stockholm isn't that big though. Is it?
I don't know.
think so.
I've never been to Stockholm, I can't tell you.
Isn't it like Copenhagen size?
Someone, Flau
Wait,
says,
wait.
train to Central Station, then go by subway. Apparently subway is really good. But subway has a lot of people,
Oh, yeah,
man.
yeah.
Don't like people, man.
People,
Really
Monkey
don't like
W.
people.
How big is Copenhagen compared to Stockholm? Stockholm is smaller than Copenhagen.
That tells me everything.
Copenhagen is not that big.
Isn't Sweden in general a pretty small place?
Sweden is 7 times bigger than Denmark.
It's pretty fucking
Well,
big, but a lot of it
I
is
mean,
just
Denmark's
like snow.
pretty small.
Yeah, it
Sweden's
is.
Pretty decently big.
Denmark's kind of this, almost like the size of Croatia, similar. I know we have the same
You're
amount
naming
of
places that
population.
I don't even have a geographical reference for. I don't even know where the fuck it is on the map. What?
We should,
What?
you know, from now on, when we say Denmark, we should also count the Greenland. So we're actually fucking massive. Yeah.
Dude, that got straight foot in my head.
That guy is... Whoa, dude.
120 on him.
Yeah, I'm fucking... I shit on both of them. This guy's stuck on tether. He's stuck on tether.
Oh, you guys are low, man.
What's new?
He's dead. Could be on it.
No, wait, that's an 8. I knocked the Gibby. Come here, play my Noki. No, never mind. Just shit on him.
Nice, good
Send
shit,
him back.
dude.
You
I
know,
did-
Labs. New team?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's heard Nash together.
Must just resubscribed for 7 months.
I'm here, guys. What do you guys need?
RPR kiss.
For help.
Yeah, Wes.
I'm here.
Andres. Let's grab the banner. The Ash is one shot. He's behind the rock.
Good shot.
She was. She was behind the rock.
The Wraith
call
ran
right
this
there.
way.
Miss, thank you so much. Welcome back. Swagger man.
I think the Wraith is ratting.
Dude, I'm
Oh, he just went in the butthole. I just saw him.
You guys got that.
I'm not going scuba diving in there.
You guys want to know something crazy?
What's up?
It's snowing outside in Denmark.
Is that not normal?
That's pretty cool. Yeah, ask me.
It's snowing in March? You're fucked up
Yeah,
over
it's
there.
snowing.
Is that not normal?
No.
No.
Alright,
Shouldn't be
global
normal.
warming, dude. He's
It's
about to
almost
die.
spring. What is
I
spring?
don't know. The
Is it
past
not
like
spring?
the past like 5 years, it snowed in March in Connecticut.
Connecticut,
kinda weird.
dude.
Alright, Flower, thank
Yeah,
you.
it's kind of weird. It started when I was in fucking high school, and then it snowed every year since then.
Shall we?
It snowed in Canada yesterday. I mean, that's Canada. I feel like there's always
People on
snow.
me. 45, 65 purple on this fucking rock. I got fucking triple take. From far
I'm
left.
nading that guy on the cross there.
Guy here.
57,
I stuck the
99,
I'm trying to need the
99
ball.
that guy.
Fuck 130.
Fuck, 20 flush on her.
No, shot. Wait, oh, I'm coming over.
Oh my cross, I just changed color.
Robert's gonna go down now.
Oh, dude,
Fuck
big
that.
low.
Big load.
Yeah, a massive load. He stopped this Phoenix. He's tilted.
I can't hit him. I wanted to finish.
Do it.
Oh, I can? Okay. Oh no.
Good team.
killed him.
On me.
Not good.
Rut-row.
They're pushing like
Hell
crazy
yeah,
over
brother.
here.
Color
Right
down.
here.
57, headshot on Gibby.
40 flash and give
Oh
me.
my god, Gibby low.
Oh, this guy is ratting
Hands on your
here.
left, Andy.
45 purple on this guy ratting.
Red ball on. Just like, pump
Give
back
me
already.
34 blue.
We're actually against a bunch of rat runners. Dude.
I'm gonna arc in front of you and pop Phoenix.
Yeah.
He's tethering you, but you're fine. You're better than.
He's
There
dead.
you go. I
Down.
literally told you you're better than him, didn't I?
They're right here, right here.
100 on him.
Fuck.
On our back. He's gonna drop in the hole.
Yes, fuck him.
There he is.
9.
110.
Woo!
I
Hades.
can't. Is he gone?
No.
I'm not doing anything. Can you guys stop killing so I can just do a little bit?
No.
Cringed. Ba-na-na-na-na-na-na. What is this message I'm getting? Well, fuck off. Why are you messaging?
Do I play Wingman? Is that more fun than Peter? Or is Peter more fun?
Play Peter.
Peter's more fun, right?
Absolutely. Throw shadow caps on it too.
No, I have a dual shell on it.
Can't you have
I can
both?
shoot twice
On me,
as much.
on me.
Okay, Albralelie, I'm here.
I love SPPs. They're the best. They're so good.
I one magged one. That guy's on the roof. Hit it.
Hit it. You can't go anywhere.
Dead.
Can't
Stay
climb.
here.
No, that's
Sulfur?
Wait, Sulfur.
Wait. Oh, those RPR porting.
Nope, that's him. Sulfur. 90, 120 on lifeline.
Dead.
Yeah, that's it.
I got gold back, but I don't want to give it to you. Nah, I'm joking. Come.
You're so rude, man.
Yeah, that's a match. I hurt my feelings, man.
My head. You got my head.
Oh,
No,
dead,
my
dead,
ass, I was
dead,
touching my
dead,
head.
dead.
How am I alive?
Dude, give me low. Third one.
Like shit
1
on,
HP, bro.
Third one.
shit on bad. Dude, I was literally hands off my keyboard scratching my ass. I'm not kidding.
Hey, my man.
Dude,
I'm sitting with my knee up, dude.
I panicked, tried to get back to my keyboard, hit the escape key, hit tab, hit escape again, still live.
Back to my keyboard. How long away is your ass, dude? That's like full fucking travel for you.
It is, bro. I was going through it.
Holy shit, you're digging. Oh my god.
Fuck.
Dude, like, get back to my keyboard. That was a marathon for you. Oh. Oh yeah, that's actually a good question. Are you gonna wear a TSM jersey or a C9 jersey? You're gonna use a TSM, right?
TSM, yeah. Unless like C9 loaned me, but they're not, as far as I know. So
No.
I should be a TSM jersey.
Nice. What about a Scars jersey instead?
You wanna wear that one? Yeah, Mande, you should wear it. But
I will wear it everywhere if all three of you sign it.
Oh my
Yeah,
God.
but you know what we should worry about, Mande?
Literally everywhere. I won't take it off. I won't wash it.
Mande should worry about if he's gonna get a new jersey because the old one doesn't fit.
My old ones don't fit, dude. I look like a fucking toddler when I have them on, dude.
Dude, please walk the land in the tiny jersey.
Oh my god.
Andy walk around in the crop top jersey, RPR in the maid outfit.
It's like a medium or some shit.
Yeah, because Japanese sizes, their XL is like our fucking medium, pretty much. Double XL is L or shit like that. But I have their XL and it fits me well.
Oh, I smoked that guy.
Thank God we killed him.
Hit him with the goddamn Peter.
Look at this shit. Like, how is this real life? Like, it doesn't work.
Ow, ow.
Come
You
on,
gonna
please.
teleportation or what?
I'm trying my hardest! Oh, I had it for a second. There we go.
Yeah!
Dude, I think I clicked
job.
like 400 times.
He's running.
Where?
He's gonna die. Don't worry about it. He's already dead.
Okay. I killed two.
But the Ash TP needs some fucking work, man. If I lose another game to an Ash TP, I'm gonna be molded.
I'm close.
Like that one that fucked us in fucking tree, bro. I'll never forget that one.
Actual traumatic Ash ults.
Dude, I couldn't get us up to fucking up the cliff, dude. I had to jump up and I died because of it.
Man.
It was the biggest fucking pain ever. And we were in a really good spot as well. Very vulnerable.
Oh, it's you.
I'm TPing out, I'm TPing out. I took it back in.
Horizon dead.
Take it back in. 99, 90, 37.
I just walked on them.
Yeah, you did.
Where'd the
Who's that
Horizon go?
Selfridge?
I think he's got it. They're out. Yeah, the Horizon has it.
Yeah.
Oh, there he is. Why are you putting up the knock? You know you're already dead. He saw you.
Horizon's left
Maybe
foot.
salvage it, you know? I didn't know.
Oh, Peter!
Off middle, 30 player. 99. Oh, you're dead. It's Gaspurja. Who? I don't know.
Oh, where are you going?
Hell yeah, brother.
He ashboarded into my wingman headshot.
Boy, what the hell, boy?
Oh, dude, he's got the big guns.
Nice. Dude, why is it snowing so much?
I'm really like
That's
trying
crazy.
to.
Oh, yeah.
I'm really trying to get used to, and this is really important, Mac. I think if you care about the well-being of your team, you should do it as well. Get used to running a fucking DT on your Mastiff, because your teams are smoking everything, bro. They're smoking cock,
Oh,
they're
yeah,
smoking
yeah.
left, they're smoking right.
We already run digits because we run Caustic.
It actually saved us so many
cringe.
games because we ran DTs on our Mastiffs, and you just swap
Well, we
it.
just swapped the Caustic, so we're not that cringe, Mandy. You guys were gonna
that's
do it
pretty
too,
cringe.
so we did it.
We never did
We
it.
are gonna do it.
Yeah, you were. You remember? I remember.
We were gonna do it if
Yeah,
they
and
didn't
then
nerf him.
Yeah.
But thank God they nerfed him, so we're not disgusting humans.
Oh, he's still everywhere in NA.
I
Yeah,
think he's
I
good.
know.
On me. They're in the ring, in the donut. 60 on
In the
blood.
ring.
I wish I played Caustic instead of Gibby. I fucking hate this character.
How? Gibby's so fun to play.
I fucking hate this character.
You're special.
Especially in comp.
39. Yeah. He's still behind the rock. You right here? It's only one guy or what?
Yeah, it is. Go back.
Nice.
I have a habit of hating what I'm good at. Like I'm like bad at Wraith, I'm bad at characters like that, but I want to be better at them and I like playing them. I'm good at Gibby, but I fucking hate playing him.
I think every Gibby main
The
hates
same thing
playing
with
Gibby.
Path.
Except for me.
Oh, you like playing Gibby since
Kind
when?
likes it.
Yeah, I like playing Gibby.
I
Holy
pretty much
shit, I
just play him
almost
in
sent
rank so
myself.
that I don't get out of the habit of being big.
Ah!
70 on bang.
42 on one guy.
Gibby ulted. They're
Oh
gonna
my
swing
God.
back to that and shoot us.
90 on that guy,
Oh, shit.
he's running away. Headshot that guy
I
on
got
red.
exploded. I died because my weapon out.
Okay, that guy is a fucking turbo
24,
hava.
Randy. On me.
Hey, 58 headshot.
I almost died to that. I'm dead.
Why? My god. Hey. Holy shit. That's
Alright,
Yeah.
I'll tap as well. Cool.
crazy. Oh shit, I got hit by 2 people. Never mind, he's not that crazy.
I got hit by 2 people, but that Havoc guy hit me for 160.
Oh, they just got their 5th KP, dude. Poggers.
Shit hurted. I need to order food. I'm starving.
Wait back 1 sec.
Good luck. Wow, a golden. Nice. What the fuck is that?
Sex with them.
Is that the Croatian fucking Jesus?
I'm back. The package just came in.
Is it a Taco Bell breakfast kind of angle?
I don't know what that is.
Dude.
We don't have that NA stuff here.
And of course it rained today.
Taco Bell makes Mexican food, right?
Yeah.
That's dog shit for breakfast. Fuck
What did
that.
you send me?
Well, okay. Do you guys ever? I don't know how
Yes.
like different EU is. You guys ever have like breakfast burritos? Like you take like a burrito or like a tortilla and you fill it with eggs, bacon, and potatoes
I
and
make
stuff
that
like
myself.
Oh,
that. That's a breakfast burrito. That's what I'd be
I've tried
getting,
more.
essentially.
Yeah, that's pretty good. But what kind of sauce do you get in it? That's the real question.
You know what queso is?
No.
It's basically like a cheese sauce.
Sour
with, like, peppers and
candy
stuff in it.
mystery box.
No, that's bad.
It's really good.
Don't eat that.
Dude.
You don't want peppers in
Stuff,
anything.
okay.
Peppers are ass.
Not like pepper, but like I don't
Bell
fucking
pepper?
know. Like a thin, like a thinly sliced, cooked down pepper.
Bell pepper, yeah. I'm allergic. They taste like shit.
Not a bell pepper.
You're
You are
allergic or they
to a
taste
bell
like shit?
pepper?
Yeah.
Which one? Allergic or tastes like shit?
All of them.
Well, are
No,
you
this is an
allergic?
all-
important difference. This is an
I'm getting
important
pushed.
difference.
No, I'm allergic to bell peppers. Like the red, yellow, green,
Well,
all
it's the
of
same
them.
thing. It's just ripeness.
No,
You're coming top mid, Mandy.
I don't ask. I
They're
didn't
going up
ask.
to you, Mande. I naded on the outside of the bub by. Boom. Boom. He jumped into my nade.
I'm behind the wall.
I'm
Obviously.
behind.
Dude, why are you holding your knock? What do you hope to accomplish, Gibby?
I
What
don't
are
know.
your hopes and dreams? Put it down. Put it down or I'll put you
I'm
down.
gonna put it down.
Nah, I
You
got
got
it.
him.
Cool, cool, cool.
Nah, I remember I talked with you about this, man, dude. About
Yeah.
how I've never had a kebab.
Yeah.
Really.
Oh.
We said that we were
can
gonna get
in
kebab.
Sweden?
Yeah, we can get kebab. I'm so excited.
Kebab in Sweden is dude, it's not as good as Denmark or Germany, but it's still good.
It's not as good as it's here. either.
I give. All right, listen. Everyone can hear this. I will buy a kebab for you and pay for it. All right.
I will hold you
I
to
will
that.
for a gift. As a gift, dude.
The kebab
From
we
me
had
to you.
in Denmark wasn't as good as the ones I have here.
Shut up, bro.
Just saying, you guys
Hey,
just
where
have
are
up his
you?
ass.
Wait, RPR, I forgot where you're from.
I'm from
Croatia?
Croatia, but we live
Yeah,
very
okay.
close to
That's what I
Turkey,
thought.
so
Yeah.
we
Oh,
have
you
a
know,
lot
never mind.
of real
You probably got
Turkish
good
kebab.
kebab there.
Yeah,
It's not like where kebab is from.
it's from Turkey.
Turkey?
Right?
Oh.
Turkey and
Huh?
Turkey
Turkish
and,
dishes.
and also Greece has really good like similar food.
Yeah.
So
Oh,
kebabs
dude.
here are fucking boss and boss.
Oh, you got tired?
Tired of your bullshit? No, I'm not. I'm a little bit maybe.
I'm not tired, I'm good.
I'm
After
I'm body,
Breakfast right now.
after those 6 days of fucking Apex competitive in a row, I definitely feel a little bit fatigued. Not gonna lie.
I am. It's
I'm a
crazy.
little bit fucked up, dude.
I fucking love like back to back to back days.
Yeah, but 6
Yeah,
is a
it's
little bit
nice,
much,
like-
man.
No, I love that. I'd do it every day if I could.
Yeah, I don't know. It's like,
Absolutely.
I don't know, maybe it's different for me because I'm an IGL, but bro, I get fatigued really hard after a day of like full day of thinking.
I want to be an IGL, but I don't know. I would love to literally just play comp all the time.
Yeah, well, it's different because your
Chase it
team,
and shit, it could be fun, dude.
your team is also very like separate IGLing.
Oh,
In my team, I'm like more like NRG where I try to like do most of the thinking. And like micro and macro and everything, micro.
that's how we're supposed to be. But I'm just a dumbass and I throw ideas out.
Yeah, I'll stop doing that completely.
Yeah, I need to stop for the most part. 40?
Fuck these motherfuckers, dude.
Hey, even if idea is good, it could fuck up your IGL.
Yeah.
Take it.
Pretty perp on red.
Wild blue 40.
Wait, no low.
I don't up on the right.
50,
Whoa,
50 blue on
zero.
blood on, I think.
16. Wraith is like literally one shot. I'm fucking Wraith, eh?
On our left here.
Two on the right. What's it?
1 HP valve. Dead.
Blood very low.
50?
I do realize that Ash has been so much better for us, man. Like even on World's Edge, like
You were
Ash
playing
is-
Wraith before, right?
Yeah, Wraith, and then I played Ashe only on Stormpoint, and then one time I was like, bro, why not play Ashe on fucking World's Edge as well? It's like her port is so instant and so like clutch, you know, like you clutch up a whole game.
You prefer it for like the fighting ability or like? What do you
I like
really
I like
about
it comboed with Valkyrie's ult Like we could fuck up our wall cult and I could get us out of a shit situation instantly and get us a salvageable spot if I Ashult. And I also like the fact that I can play low ground and not be afraid that we won't be able to get up or we'll have to wall cult up. But we can play low ground and then fucking Ashult up and still like insta fight.
I've really been liking having like Loba on Storm Point. That shit is actually insane. I don't know if you guys play it.
I was thinking of having Loba, but I said to myself, if we're gonna play Loba, we're literally gonna leave every POI after like 40 seconds. We're not gonna loot at all, because otherwise what's the point?
Yeah, that's what we do.
Yeah, literally just go best spot.
Do you like any of you is like Storm Point like super positioning heavy? Because for us, like everyone plays edge. So, like everything is just open.
It's a bit of both in EU, but
That's what game we're on.
there's teams that edge in, but for the most part people play zone, and we also play zone, but we're barometer, so rotation is a little bit slower than others because we have a lot of fucking like area to loot, but our loot is busting. So we usually
Do you get the car? Or do you not
not
buy the car at
anymore,
all?
not anymore. after
Yeah,
GTA
not after,
experience,
not
not
after
anymore.
GTA, dude.
That's no more car after that.
Hate to see that. Fucking Launchpad, it's the worst when the Fish Farms team will try to like greed 2 cars.
Oh yeah.
Because they get Gale Station and they can take the one at Fish. But like, I don't know. If a team starts doing that in scrims, we're like, they're gonna learn real quick.
The thing is, like,
That shit does not fly.
we sometimes don't get beacons, so we sent a Shin on like a suicide mission to beacon scan instantly, because like barometer is so big, we have to scan instantly and loot at the same time and leave, because if we loot then go scan, we could get fucked hard on zone. So we have to sometimes send a Shin on like a suicide mission like next to barometer somewhere, Jurassic or something, and let him solo scan while we loot.
We do the same shit with Naughty.
It's a pretty risky strat, but you have to do it if you want to if you want to get the spot. Nah, Buddha, we didn't. But I really like Storm Point. I don't give a fuck what anyone else says. I think it's a great map for competitive.
I have a incredibly controversial take. I don't mind Storm Point, but I would rather play on Olympus.
I honestly.
That's fucking, you're smoking crack, dude.
I like Casey a lot.
I
in
like
competitive.
Olympus.
Olympus is cool, but it just feels too small, dude.
I like
I think it
Casey a
would
lot.
be
In, like,
beautiful comp map.
remember old KC and plus World's Edge when it was 2 maps in comp? I loved that. I fucking loved that. I loved playing 2
KC
maps.
But, like old PC, like before they removed Skulltown.
Before, no, it was after they removed Skulltown, before they added the fucking dog shit north part.
Dude, KC about 50% bigger.
Oh man, that was such a fucking whiff.
Honestly,
Hello, is my hand just like...
I wouldn't mind 3 maps if
That's
they brought
crazy.
back, if they fixed KC and brought it back. I wouldn't
What's
fucking
the dude
mind
here?
that.
I know.
I'm gonna tether that.
109 on Valk.
Yeah, I tethered him.
Oh, I got Kraben.
Oh shit, this is bad. I'm in the bad
Drop it on
spot.
me.
1 HP valve.
Right on.
I'm in a bad spot. I'm in a shit spot.
They're getting EMP, third party.
He's one shot.
I got around, Mande. How am I alive, bro? I'm healing. You got up, Mac?
Yeah.
Holy shit,
Sucking
what is
down a penis
happening?
kit. He just swung and one banged me.
Okay, that's fine. We can get you out, I think. Well, we don't have port and we don't have...
He
we don't
died
have...
for that.
Mande, what's happening to you?
Fucking
Okay.
got the painter on me with a fucking Devo.
Keep crawling, Mac. I'm gonna shoot
You
for
have
you.
ash for it?
Nope, I used it to save my life.
How the fuck do you lose that? Turbocharger Devo.
There's at least 2. I saw one all the way back here. Oh yeah. Oh.
I think we're good. I have Phoenix for you if you need.
No, I'm good.
How the fuck are we alive? I survived with 20 health in a corner. You guys have no idea.
I shit on those guys.
I was getting shitted on. Ah, he's back. Here.
Where?
Behind that
that-
fucking box.
Horrible nade.
You. Oh, what?
New team coming from southeast. Hit 120.
Open door.
They're in the room.
Oh, he's on the box, right? One's close,
Sliding
right?
forward.
34 purple on the dog pin on the right.
Dude, I'm pissed. Can't help you guys in the fucking.
I can't hit him, he's so dark.
What the fuck?
I'm fighting my life.
Crypto crack.
Oh, behind me.
Crypto low, 66 flash.
Come by life.
Got him.
What's this guy doing?
Got them all.
Who is this guy?
Dude, I just survived for way longer than I should.
There's a swap right next to you, Mac.
I was actually tap dancing in the bub.
Yeah, I know. I was surprised you're alive.
Dude, you should have
Dude.
seen the fucking moves.
I didn't hit a single shot, but I got fucking a guy just coming out of a rat behind me, just started fucking shooting me.
It's okay, I shit on him, so.
One more squad left. I love
while
rank.
Mac was tap dancing, I was fucking shitting on them, so it all worked out.
Dude, they were staring at me, and I'm just sitting there actually flossing in the bubble. Like,
Flossing, dude. But like ninja or what? Holy shit, dude.
absolutely, bro.
Oh my, dude, that clip's still fucking. Oh,
That
dude.
has to haunt him.
Oh my god, that clip is crazy, dude.
Yeah, that would hurt my feelings, that's for sure.
Oh my sad
Right in front of me.
god, dude.
Funny hopping away, doing
Motherfucker
the arm,
smoking
and I
dick,
just
dude.
got mastiffed.
Brother?
Almost cracked right in front of me. I only saw the ash. Oh, there's two. Ash fucking cracked.
Talked.
Fog?
The rest him. And ported him.
I'm taking the portal.
Oh,
Hi, how
fuck,
are
it's
ya?
the board. Did they res him? No, they didn't.
Yeah, they did. I knocked it. I'm gonna open them. They're gonna slide down. So smart.
Oh, your mom, dude.
What the fuck going on?
11. Oh!
Please kill him. He's going bad. You got this. Did you just single tap that shit?
Yeah. Well, goes.
Tap dancing. Do you see those Minecraft kids that have like 150 clicks per second?
What the fuck?
Dude, imagine single fire tapping with 100 clicks per second, dude.
Actual machine gun.
Holy shit, Dippy, you
Don't even
sent
need
so
full
much
auto at
shit.
that point.
They have like, what it's called? They have like tape on their mouse, and then I don't know, they just like. brrrr.
They super glue their finger to the, to the mouse.
It's fucking weird, dude.
Dippy, you sent so much fucking
Drag
shit.
clicking apparently.
Goddamn.
I don't know, dude. This is a very bad take. If you played Minecraft as like competitive and you tried to like win all those Hunger Games and shit like that, you're fucking cringe, dude.
Okay, dude.
The tactics
I'm
are
so
good.
sorry, man.
Okay, listen. I wasn't like a Minecraft Hunger Games gamer.
Tactics
But
are
back
good,
in the
man.
day, bro. Okay, let me just ask this. Did you ever play Minecraft?
Yeah,
Were you a
but I
Minecrafter?
was like,
Did you play factions?
"Ooh." No, I didn't do
Okay.
shit like that. I
Yeah,
just
I was
started my own
a-
server.
I was a faction sweat. Me and my friends. We'd like make an Enderman farm and punch them to level up our unarmed skill, and then go PvP and punch people, and they'd get disarmed, and we'd just kill them with their own weapon.
Oh,
These are good, man.
dude, what? You know what I used to? You know what I used to play a lot in Counter Strike, CSS.
Thank you,
I
Dippy.
used to play a lot of
Scouts and
like-
knives.
No, Scouts Knife, but also RPG servers. I was like, I went to this most scam shit I've ever done in my life, right? So I went to this server. I helped guys set up the entire server and everything, right? And you know, I also rat back then, so I was like, yeah, I don't know, maybe for helping you, like maybe you can give me some levels or something, you know, I don't know. You know, and he was like, yeah, I'll give you like 10,000 levels, dude. And dude, I was stacked. I would like run 400 million kilometers an hour, boom, straight up and spawn, and I would knife people so they were stuck for like 10 minutes. They couldn't move.
Actually toxic, bro.
Yeah, and then like,
Didn't you
I
used
played
to
that server all
scam
the
people
time.
when you were younger?
no, I never scam people.
I did.
I'll scam people in MapleStory, but that's the only scam I've
Yeah.
ever done.
I remember that.
Okay, actual scammers.
I was like, yeah, you want to do drop game? I'll drop my item and you'll drop yours. I would show them like a rope that was mega upgraded. And because you can't see upgraded stuff on the floor, I would take a rope that wasn't upgraded at all and like the same one. And I'd be like, yeah, I'll drop this and you drop yours. Boom, I'd take my rope back up and he would drop like some fucking crazy shit that was like multiple millions worth. And I would steal it, I would just log off instantly.
And dude, I also remember you got scammed in RuneScape, didn't you? By your friend?
By my friend scammed me, yeah.
Yeah. That was
My
nice.
friend scammed the fuck out of me, dude. I used his member account to pick some stuff that you can only do on members. And dude,
Yeah.
and then he was like, oh, dude, I just need half of it. And he fucking mega scum after me.
Actually, shit on.
Dude, this guy does not miss us.
Dude! Dude!
Dude, he hidden, right?
Yeah, that shit hitting.
Oh, on me?
Yeah, Gibby. That's the guy that's
I'm
hidden.
fucking.
Yo,
Gibby's
purple
on the
heart.
stairs
13?
here.
Dude, what the fuck?
I tethered him back.
He's trying to shoot through my bum.
I almost cracked him.
Get on the
I'm,
left.
I'm
Yo,
down for a
ape
Bobby
ape
fight.
up, ape up.
I'm down for this.
30?
80.
Excuse me?
Give you one. Crack the blood on.
Ah, you're dead,
Surface
dead.
Let us
Boom. Boom. Chill.
Wow, you guys got fucking
dolphin in them.
destroyed. Destroyed.
Oh my god.
Why are you saying it like that?
Destroyed.
Shoot, gala touche. Pum pum pum. Pum pum pum.
So I
You
just
guys
tried.
like Russian music?
Oh, hard bass?
Yeah, shit like that.
Bus. Hard
It goes
bus.
pretty crazy.
I just tried Takis for the first time in my life. I like them.
You tried Takis?
Yeah.
I don't
Oh,
like them.
the chips?
Yeah.
They're like not even a chip, they're like a.
Like a
I don't even
thing.
know what the fuck you'd call it.
Crunchy thing, swirly thingy. Thing.
Yeah, I've
Yeah.
seen it. Are they good? I
Yeah.
never tried it.
They're not.
Personally, I don't like them.
I don't know. I expect it to be really hot. It really isn't that hot. But
No, people
they
are fucking
taste well.
pussies, dude.
It's
They
like a hot
taste
Cheeto,
nice.
but with like lime.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I've seen
it's
people
kinda
be
ni-
like, oh, hot Cheetos,
it's kind of
they
like
burn.
sour. It's kind of like sour a bit because of lime. So I like. it.
Yeah, that's a lime.
Oh, what's up?
What the fuck? What the fuck is happening? there.
Dude, it's trying to get up in the whip, dude.
Crack right.
Dude. Where is this guy going? Sir. Bonk. Sir?
Why are you running? Oh, wingman. There we go. Yeah, how about a mod of mine sends me like care package of like American snacks I never tried. So the other day, like, he sent me a bunch of like sour shit that I've never tried because you guys have a lot of sour candy and I like sour.
what?
Oh no, there's everything, bro. Like,
Oh my god, dude.
Warhead, Sour Patch
horny
Kids.
yesterday.
Dude, I love sour candy, bro.
I fucking love it. That's my favorite candy. I usually don't
Did you
eat
get,
candy
like,
at all.
If you got like sour straws or warheads, that shit
Yeah,
goes
yeah,
hard.
warheads, fucking everything,
Did you
bro.
get your
Like,
toxic waste?
Oh my god.
yes, toxic waste.
Toxic
fucking-
waste is so much better than warheads.
There,
So good.
there was this one thing, like comes in like a little toxic container. Is that toxic waste?
Yeah, it comes in a yellow barrel.
Yeah, and you open it, it's like
Wrappers are black
super
and red.
fucking sour. It's like ridiculously
Yeah.
sour. Yeah, I love that.
It's good though. I like them more than warheads because the candy isn't like bitter after. Warheads get like bitter.
I don't like Sour Patch Kids that much because they're more sweet than sour.
Yeah. If he sent you sour straws, you'd probably like those.
Yeah, I don't know if
They're
I
like
tried
the
it.
same. They're like the same texture as a Sour Patch Kid, but it's a long straw.
Oh
And
my God.
they're way more sour than they are sweet. They're not like crazy sour or
weird.
anything, but they're good.
He sent me teardrops or whatever, sour teardrops or some shit like that. That was pretty
I
sour.
haven't had those.
And now he sent me a mystery box of sour candy and a bunch of like Takis and Cheetos and shit that I never tried.
Takis here.
Big hookup.
Did he send you the blue Takis?
I don't know. Let me see.
You'd know. The chips are blue.
How does the packaging look?
It's like purple and orange and blue, I think.
I have a package here that's purple and blue.
It would show the snack on the front of it, and they'd be blue. They'd be like blue straws.
Let me see. There's so many I haven't checked.
So many. How many fucking packages did you get?
A lot.
My man is like in the packages, like it's a pile of leaves.
Yeah, I'm gonna buy my fucking PO box soon.
I can't see it anywhere, but I don't know. There's like 5-6 different Takis and fucking Cheetos and but they're
I
just
sent you the blue ones then. The blue ones are my favorite out of any.
it's like they're like small packages. They're not like massive like bags. You know, they're like
Yeah.
smaller
Elf,
bags.
can you bring your favorite candy to Sweden? I'll bring mine.
Yeah, sure. If
And we
they,
can trade, dude.
I don't know
you-
how like customs
can you
works.
take it
Would
on the
they
airport?
take that from me? Yeah, I don't know.
I think if you
If it's in my
take it-
carry-on, I think.
Yeah, in your backpack or your carry-on, you can do it. Wait, do
Yeah,
you
I'll do
put your gear in your carry-on, right? Like your
Yeah.
mouse and keyboard and shit?
I'm not sure how I'm gonna get a mouse pad there because I use the high end, and like you're not supposed to bend it.
Oh
Oh,
yeah.
I'm using the same one.
I might just have to like get one shipped there.
I think I'm gonna fucking just
Like I
lay
got
it
shit on.
in the fucking carry-on.
Ah, you're dead. You're
Lay it
dead.
straight, and then put a bunch of like clothes top it. Tell Mac
Yeah, I
I'll
was
link
about
the
bringing
candy I
my,
sent in the chat. He's gonna link the candy you send me in your chat, Mac. So you can see.
I hit the guy 130. He's running into you.
Oh, dude, he's so mad.
Do you have sulfur doses, boys?
Boys. They're probably already up.
Gosh. Yep.
That's fine, look at this.
Dude.
None of you self-res? Hello? You're just sitting
You guys
here
have
while we were gone and you didn't even attempt to self-res? What the fuck? I'm already deep into the self-res, dude. I'm already up. I'm running away, dude. Yeah, but I like Takis.
What
I
kind
like
of...
sourness. The sourness, I like it.
Oh,
Yeah,
do I
that-
want candy now?
What kind do you like, Mandu?
I love
What kind of
everything,
something you
dude.
like?
He's
Dude,
got
like,
a
I'm
alright,
a
sweet
what's
tooth.
your
fucking man
preferred?
child. What do you mean?
He's got
Are
a
you like a
sweet tooth.
chocolate man? Or are you like a
Oh,
like
no,
a
no, no,
super
dude,
sweet or
chocolate-
like a sour?
Dude, chocolate's fucking boring, dude.
I
He's a-
agree.
he's
I actually don't like chocolate either. My man.
He's-
Chocolate is
he's-
boring. I swear. When people are like, "Oh, bring your own candy," and they bring chocolate, like, what's wrong with you? Holy shit, dude.
Yeah, but you like
No,
sweet
that-
shit, man. They like very sweet shit.
I like sour shit too, dude. Dude, I
I
like,
got
you know, like, you know, I have this weird. I heard a lot of people don't have it, but I can. When I think of a certain taste, I can feel it in my mouth.
Yeah. We start talking
I
about
do-
sour shit and I'm already salivating.
Yeah, same. I'm like, I get this, you know. But every time I eat sour, like, my entire body like fucking crunches up together.
Convulses.
Dude. I'm like,
Oh,
Oh, dude.
okay. He
It's-
just
I
sent
love
me.
it.
He just sent me what he sent you. Okay, it's the warhead tear or the crybaby teardrops. Those are crazy.
Yeah, those are really sour, but I like them.
Yeah. Those are really good. The roll is pretty good.
Yeah, the roll
The
was
warheads
fucking
in general are good. The airheads are gonna be more sweet than sour.
Yeah,
Or airhead. Yeah. Airheads. Those are good.
Toxic Waste was by far my favorite.
What
I
are
think.
those? Oh, the sweet tart sours. Are those the chewy ones?
I think so. Yeah. There were
Holy
some.
shit, dude.
I also like I like
sweet
gummy
tarts are
candy.
usually like paste, or not paste, like dust. You bite into them and they crunch and then dissolve.
Like I prefer gummy candy over hard candy, right?
Like
So-
taffy.
I don't know what that is.
Yeah, I don't like how can it make my teeth hurt. I don't know why.
Wait,
And, like, I
does
feel
you
like my
not have taffy?
No, I don't know what
Taffy.
that is.
It's like gum but edible. You can swallow it. It dissolves.
Oh, I don't think I've ever had that.
Edible gum?
Yeah. It's like soft. It's
But more
soft,
like-
it's really chewy. It's
I was
like
thinking
gum, but
more like
it slowly
gummies, you
dissolves.
know? You know, more like gummy worms, gummy bears, and shit like that. I'll prefer that over hard candy. But if it's sour on top of like sour gummy worms and shit like that, then it's like 10 times better.
Okay, if you guys don't have taffy, I have to bring up a bunch of taffy.
Yeah, I don't think we have
That is
toffee
by
here.
far my favorite kind of candy.
Sour Patch Kids are good preparation, but I don't like how sweet they are. I would prefer they were less sweet than more sour. If you name your fucking candy Sour Patch Kids, it has to be fucking sour and not sweet.
Ever have soft caramel candy?
Nope.
Have you tried toffee before?
Toffee, yeah, that
God,
shit
what?
busting hard, dude.
Toffee, that is insane.
I don't
That's
know what
like
that is.
So good.
ooh, dude, my dad has a crazy story with toffee. So like there's these almonds inside, okay? So my dad helped when he was like when he was younger or whatever. My dad helped this old lady move a bunch of stuff, like she was moving in, and she had these almonds on the stand that were fucking good, dude. Right? Like they're insane. They were eating them all the time and shit. And then the old lady apparently ate the toffee and sucked the almonds dry of sugar,
no
of
shot.
chocolate, and put it in a bowl, dude.
No
God.
shot.
Dude, those almonds in the toffee are crazy, dude. I swear, they are crazy.
Dude, I would actually feel so fucking betrayed. Dude, I probably would have projectile vomited on the spot, bro. That would have been it. I would have never went back and saw that lady.
108 on one guy?
Yeah, but toffee is
Dude,
insane.
they
we should
think I'm
bring
cheating
it. We
100%.
should bring it for him, Mande. Toffee.
I did
And
240 damage.
Have
now.
you ever
Yeah, we
have you
should.
ever had Toblerone? Albralelie?
Yeah.
Oh,
yeah.
that's crazy.
Yeah,
Those are
Toblerone's good.
busting, dude. What else could be like? What? I think a bunch of Kinder. You probably didn't have a bunch of Kinder that we have like here.
You're gonna push, 120 on him.
Toblerone overrated. I like Toblerone. It's nice.
I did 70 to 2 of them. The Wraith is gonna die if you. Oh, I thought you were pulling on him.
110. Dude, I did like.
Knocked one. Knocked one.
No.
Ooh. Oh no, that's this one.
Knocked a caustic, and they're
They're
getting
shot
shredded.
back.
Knocked another one.
Mandy makes a portal in 6s. Hundo P. If he doesn't, he's
I
fake.
know one downstairs.
There's 3 knocked.
Yeah. These guys are pissed. I'm killing the guy downstairs.
Okay.
I straight up did 900 damage to them.
Kinder is like those eggs, right?
Well, there's
Yeah.
a lot of Kinder style.
Oh.
Like Kinder is like a whole company. They do
Oh.
a
Yeah,
bunch of
Kinder
shit.
eggs are crazy. Kinder eggs are insane.
You ever had Kinder Bueno? Like that's one of the best chocolate bars
Oh,
that ever exist.
bueno.
No,
They're
never had
crazy.
it.
That's
Kinder
it.
bueno is so good.
I
dude.
might get
so
fucked. That's
good.
gonna scam.
No, you're good. I have Kraber over you. You're good.
Don't be
Now
fooled.
I
You wanna learn a little trick here, Albralelie?
If he says he's got me, he doesn't.
No. I'll show you a trick. Look at this RPR too. I just discovered this.
Kinder Max.
You can't get seen.
I've been knowing about
Oh,
that.
is that head glitch? Oh.
Yeah,
Yeah,
you
yeah.
can't be seen or anything.
You ever had Kinder Maxi, Mande? Like that
Yeah.
look kind of like. I don't know how to describe it, but it's fucking busting, dude.
Have you had fuck, what are they called? They're called Kinder like milk slices.
I had everything Kinder, man. Davalk is just standing still. like a
Nice,
fucking
good shot, man.
dumbass.
60.
They're resing him now.
I'm gonna ruin their fucking life.
Same.
63.
Kiss your mother with that mouth. Crack the blood on. There on the right side.
Body shot, body shot. Body shot again. Body shot again. Body shot again. How's he not dead yet? What?
You body
Headshot,
body shotting me? Hello?
Body shot, body shot, body shot, body shot, body shot. Dude, how did
Got
not
it.
dead yet? What is this?
Oh, Kinder Pingui, you ever had those?
Kinder, yeah. Dude, I'm
Mac?
a Kinder King, dude.
You ever had
Oh,
Kinder
that sounds
Pingui?
like a Kinder King. Kinder means child in German, dude.
The Kinder kid did. You're the kid did. The child kid did. Kinder is Italian, is it Kinder German?
Kinder is German. It means kid. The Kid King, dude. Holy shit.
Oh, here, look at him. Poor little baby. I missed.
Wait 2 seconds. There. Langs and drink.
No, but Kinder Pingui like is so good that people made it into a cake, bro. And people like have actual like you can actually get cakes of it.
I mean, that just sounds like what we do with Oreos. I don't know, like I don't know how out of the loop EU is, but like with Oreos, like you guys got Oreos at least, like
Yeah,
I
we
don't
got
know.
Oreos.
Yeah, dude.
Okay.
Oreos are not my favorite, but I don't mind them.
I love Oreos. They're pretty good. They're not crazy though,
They're not,
but
yeah, they're not nothing crazy. But they're not bad. Like
They're
I'll
pretty
eat them.
basic. Little Oreo ice cream, Oreo cake.
Oreo ice cream is a different story though. Oreo ice cream is good, but Oreos by themselves I feel like Oreos are like type of cookie you like put into everything else. You don't really eat it by yourself.
Yeah, yeah.
oh, I like Oreos with
Nope.
I used to eat Oreos with Oreos with a fork, and I would put like the fork on the white stuff, and I would dip it in water. No, in milk.
Water?
Milk, no,
Water,
milk,
dude?
milk,
What is wrong with you, dude?
milk. I'll dip it in milk, dude.
Dude, but definitely Kinder Pingui, Mac. It's like kind of like think of it this way. It's a rectangle, and it's a hard shell chocolate outside, and inside it's like a cream, like a white cream. Whipped cream, I guess.
Yo, cream?
Yeah, it's creamy, dude.
Chocolate brown cream on me, bro. Dude, I'll go through your dumbass. I don't care.
I'm whipping. I'm dying.
Don't die.
He just went between my legs. I feel violated.
Without consent?
Dude, I did not consent to that. That man just fucking slid between my legs.
That's crazy.
How would I
like a
describe
fucking-
Kinder Pingui, dude? I don't even know how to describe it. It's just like
Oh.
You know, I have no idea what you guys have over there. It's like, yeah, you guys got mint chocolate chip ice cream.
you,
sure.
Mande. You ever had Kinder Schnitte?
Yeah,
Dude, that shit's also bussin', dude.
that's the milk slices I'm talking about.
Yeah, those are so good.
They're nuts. They're disgustingly good.
They're like you'll eat 20 and get fucking diabetes. Good. On the roof.
I died. It's like, bro,
Like
take
I
Oreos, put them in milk and mint chocolate chip ice cream, and that shit is insane.
Blue armor on one guy. 120 armors.
I'll give you
Knocked.
that.
Cranked the Pathfinder down here.
Wait, I figured they'd be in the building. They're not.
They ran.
What the fuck is going on? What the fuck is happening?
What is happening? He's won.
I can hit him. That he's doing all the jukes and shit because you're shooting at him.
Hello, my friend.
Oh, he's on a
Oh.
leash. Oh no. You can put him on a leash. I love doing that with the fucking with the tether, bro.
On me.
The best is when you catch someone falling. And it's attached
Yeah,
to a
and
wall.
they're like
just
going
hanging out.
back. They're like flying back.
Don't lose, Mandy. Don't lose.
He's won! Fuck you.
Dead.
Yeah, we just talked about Milk Schnitte, kaboom. Kit Kat. Yeah, but Kit Kat exists everywhere. Everyone tried Kit
Yeah.
Kat.
You guys
I
have
wanna-
like the crazy flavors that they have in like Japan?
No, I want to try those. Like matcha
I
flavor
do
and
too.
shit.
What?
Twix is so good. Oh my god. I don't care what anyone says. Twix is gold. You have Twix in any?
I have. Oh
Twix?
wait.
Twix, yeah.
Twix?
Yeah,
Yo,
yeah, yeah.
Those
Is
are
that
really
from
good.
NA Twix?
I think
I
it
know.
is.
Dude, hey, guys, have you guys had the strawberry cheesecake ice cream?
No.
Yes, dude. There's a
I bought
place.
one yesterday.
There's a place near me that does like shaved ice cream, and they do
Yeah.
a strawberry cheesecake, one of that, and they put like chunks of the cheesecake and strawberries and shit in it. It is insane.
I love cheesecake, bro, but I am fucking lactose intolerant. But fuck, I would die for a slice sometimes. Once
I am
take
as
the
well,
pain.
bro. You just gotta do what you gotta do. You
Yeah.
eat that, and then later you pray to God. Like
Oh my
that's
God.
it.
The Inferno Online, this bootcamp everything, they have 4 locations in Stockholm we can go to.
Ooh. Dude, I wanna like go out and try food there, but I feel like that is like how my goofy ass will get COVID. Like going out places to get food. And I don't know if Swedish food's worth that.
I don't know. All I know is that they have a banana curry pizza, and I'll never get anywhere near that piece of shit.
Yeah. Definitely not hitting that. Absolutely not hitting that. I could see Mandy hitting that.
Hit what?
As a matter of fact, if he hits it, I'll hit it.
Hit what?
Fucking banana curry pizza.
I'll try it. Why not though? Dude,
I mean,
I
it's-
don't know. Why
I mean,
people
like,
so...
I
Yeah,
think if I take a bite, like my ancestors will actually put a curse on me, bro.
Pog.
Like my fucking grandpa's Italian, like it's chalked. It's chalked.
Dude,
Oh yeah,
He
dude.
sees me eat that, I'm getting hit. Like
You're gonna slap the fucking terrestrial, dude.
Mac, I live next to Italy. Like I live on the coast of Croatia. We share the coast with Italy, right? We're literally toes to toes with Italy. So Italian restaurants here that we have are super authentic, right? It's like we're pretty much like Italy. Like our food is a combination of Turkish, Greek, and Italian, but mostly Italian, right? When I see someone do some hideous shit to a pizza, bro, I'm already like fucking. My ancestors are fucking in their grave rolling, you know? If I ever touch something like that. Like the worst I did is kebab pizza, but that shit was kind of good though, so.
Worst.
he has a sword!
Worst.
He has a sword! Yo,
Yeah, kebab pizza is a
That guy-
disgrace for pizza as well, bro.
dude, that guy pulled up and started stabbing the shit out of me.
You don't
Pineapple-
talk shit about kebab pizza.
Pineapple on pizza is the biggest mistake ever created in history.
Pineapple-
That
pretty
shit
good on pizza.
actually isn't bad, I'm not gonna lie.
Yes,
It
let's
is
go
disgusting.
Albralelie, dude.
It
My
is
man.
disgusting.
Hey.
It can't just
Hey.
be pineapple though. It's gotta be like the full Hawaiian, so like pineapple ham, all that.
I tried Hawaiian, that shit was fucking ass.
Would I order it? No, but like if
my
it's somewhere,
God.
like am I gonna eat it? Yeah, like I'll eat it.
Yeah.
Am I take will I take off the pineapple and eat the pizza without the pineapple? Yeah, I will.
Oh, cringe.
Actually, can eat it how it's made. Good chomp.
Yes.
Come here, bubble
Fuck
my
you.
ass. Let's get schmooing.
Fuck you too.
Oh my
One
god.
dead.
Quemo Luero.
Touching our
What?
player.
YouTube.
Luero. Luero?
Why
Mega
the-
sus gamer.
The way that you rolled your tongue.
It's 2 R's, so you gotta go rrr. Luero. It's 2 R's, man. That's how it is. That's how you pronounce it. I know my shit. I took 2 years of Spanish in college, bro. Oh shit, this guy's still
Bro,
alive.
that shit- Oh, dude.
I'm fucking shooting a knockdown, dude. That guy's fucking
I
busting.
can't believe you say worst. And you say, dude, don't ever put worst and fucking kebab pizza in the same.
It's
same
really
sentence,
not
dude.
that good, bro. Like,
Are we
relax
gonna get
yourself.
kebab pizza while
Kebab
we're at
pizza is
Mandy?
not that
Get
good.
a kebab and then get kebab pizza.
Al, don't listen to this fucking dude. This guy is brainwashed. Brainwashed.
The kebab pizza is good, but it's not like the revelation of a fucking new fucking world, bro. Like, it's not that good.
Tien, I got a stab from our chat. Ban him. Ban him now. Ban him on Twitch. For
Like, he's really- bro.
misinformation. No.
Motherfucker, I tried kebab pizza with you in Denmark. I said it was
Kebab
good.
pizza is just a calzone?
No, it's
okay,
just
listen here.
pizza with kebab
Okay,
meat
shut
on
up,
top.
shut up,
It's
shut up,
literally
shut
all
up,
of
shut
the
up,
all
shut
it
up,
is, dude.
shut up. Okay, Alb, it is a nice crusty bottom pizza, right?
Okay,
Good,
okay. It's got a crunch.
good, yeah, it does. Good tomato sauce. Boom.
Okay.
You put some
He's so
fucking nice
stupid.
good cheese with some.
So it's
on,
pizza with kebab meat
You
on
put-
top. What do you
put-
mean?
You put kebab meat on top. You put some salad, some ranch dressing. Oh my god, it is juice, dude.
And then you pay 20 fucking euros because Copenhagen, dude. And then you
I feel like
cry.
you have a personal vendetta against Copenhagen kebab
Bro,
pizza,
dude,
not kebab pizza itself.
Dude, listen, kebab pizza is not bad, bro, but it's not worth
Who
20
are
fucking
you?
euros, bro. I'm telling you that much.
I don't do
That shit's not worth that much. What? He's spending bullets around corners, bro.
I got a no-reg headshot. 2 of them are 1 shot. Honestly, Mandy, go ahead and hit a clip. I'll set you up. Valk and Blood are both 1.
Yeah, he's hitting a clip right now. He's hitting it.
Hit a clip, Mandy.
Yep.
He's hitting the fucking.
Come on, Mandy. Good.
I'm sitting with my knee up. I'm playing like a fucking child right now.
Good.
Ganj, arigato.
Dude.
They're all 1. I hope you know that.
Bacon cheesesteak pizzas are amazing, apparently, according to Dippy.
Have you ever had a cheeseburger pizza?
No.
No. That is the game.
It's different. I don't know what else to say about it. It's just straight different.
No wonder you guys are fat.
They put like
Oh,
fucking,
wow.
they'll put like hamburger meat, American cheese, tomatoes, fucking pickles, sometimes bacon. Oh, alpha. Fuck. Okay.
No! I even got the armor swap.
Yeah, someone in my chat
Damn.
said you guys don't even know what coolant is, bro. That shit's... Holy shit.
The fuck is that?
Coolant is like, how would I explain
Damn.
coolant? It's a dried meat.
You guys dumb.
It's like, let me see. Okay, so this is what Wikipedia says. It's a type of flavored sausage made of minced pork that is traditionally produced in Croatia and Serbia.
That sounds like salami.
Dude, this is like... I'll show you a pic what coolant looks like. This thing is like the craziest shit ever, bro. The taste and I don't know, everything into it is fucking insane.
It's not exactly salami, so I was close.
It's
Oh,
a
dude, salami's so good. People that don't like pepperoni or salami, they're off the goop, dude.
Yeah.
It's crazy. I don't understand.
So
Pepperoni pizza.
passionate.
Pepperoni pizza is such a classic, dude. If you get a pepperoni pizza, dude, you just like the meat fucking like oh my god. People that don't like salami or pepperoni are shocked, dude.
You're
like-
so passionate about it.
Hey, dude, people that don't like that shit should have been swallowed instead.
Coolant,
Yeah, I said it.
coolant is
Straight
kind of
up.
like... Coolant's like kind of like pepperoni, but it's more like spicier and has a lot of peppers, like pepper
It
flavor.
sounds like a spicy salami.
It's really good. It's like
It sounded
probably
good, dude.
probably the best type of thing you'd ever try in your life.
I'd probably
Okay.
like it. You guys put pepperoni on like a sandwich? Like
Yeah.
a cold sandwich.
Oh, I like sandwich is underrated. I know I talked to you about this, Al, for like I think like 1.5 years ago we played, and I was like, I told you sandwiches are fucking underrated.
Oh yeah, sandwiches are god tier.
Sandwiches are the underrated food. Sandwiches are
go-to?
always good. My go-to? It depends on from where. If I'm like making one at home myself, I don't make food though. But if my girlfriend makes a sandwich for me, it's probably like a chicken sandwich with like maybe like cheese on it and some
Okay.
fucking ranch dressing with like a
Can
bunch
we
of like
agree
bacon and shit like that.
That if you make a sandwich and then your mom makes the same exact sandwich, it's gonna taste better. Can we agree?
Oh, your mom tastes better, yeah, 100%.
Yeah, definitely.
Mom's sandwich is way
100%.
better.
Always. You can make it the same exact way and it will always be better from mom.
I can have a fucking 8-star chef cook for me, and I think my mom's food's probably better. Straight up. I don't know why.
Actually,
It's just
factual. That's just that home cooked familiarity.
yeah. That's nuts.
No, but I put a coolant mac in the cold sandwiches all the time, bro. Like coolant is like you can put it. Like you can put it on pizza, you can put it in sandwiches, you can put it in anything, dude. It's like
Some versatile schmeat.
like it's like you can
Dude,
eat it by
that's a good
itself.
meat, dude. Premium meat, dude.
People make those like you know what are those cheese boards called? How do you call those?
I say it in like the definitely not right way to say it. The little charcuterie board.
Yeah, something like that. Yeah. Here we make those with coolant and like pepperoni and a bunch of shit like sliced as well.
I'm not a big fan of cheese and crackers, dude. You know, like I feel like it's just it's an annoying food to eat, dude.
Why?
Dude, that shit comes in clutch when you're streaming. Like if you're doing long streams, I'd have like a bunch of little like snack packs pre-made.
I wish I could
I
more
got, like,
cheese, but I
crackers,
can't.
cheese, pepperoni, prosciutto, shit like that.
Yeah, much on charcuterie board. I don't know how you say that shit, bro.
I don't know.
Charcuterie, bro. I don't
Charcuterie, bro. I don't fucking know.
I'm saying it hella wrong. Don't care. Charcuterie.
Charcuterie board. Sean Connery board, bro.
Yeah, the Sean
Connery?
Connery
Damn.
board.
We got the
Oh,
Sean
shit.
Connery.
Nah, it just takes too long to eat, dude. You know?
I'm dying.
It's not about speed. It's about like casual snacking.
But I never really casually snack. I have a weird thing, but I eat a lot. I know I eat very fast. 130 on that guy. You got him, Mel? I'm gonna help my boy. 110 on this guy.
I don't know who I'm shooting at.
The Valkyrie is very low. The other guy's hit for 120 also.
Shoot out.
Nice. This guy's low. Dude,
She shot that guy in the foot.
yeah, I think I talked with Rogue about this. I don't like I eat to live, not live to eat, you know?
Dude, no shot.
That's not true, bro.
Yeah.
You're always fucking
You were just so passionate about
yeah,
pepperoni,
like he's always,
that
bro.
there's no-
Every time he picks up a kebab, dude, kebab is the best. Like, dude, shawarma is the best thing ever. Oh, fucking.
Yeah, but like then
shut
I'm done
the fuck-
eating in like 10 minutes and I don't care, dude.
No shot.
I eat so fast, it's so weird. I literally ripped 2 burgers before in like 2 minutes.
When
I don't know why.
when I'm like eating a meal, yeah, I eat fast, but like I also just be snacking throughout the day. Like food, bro, that shit. I love food. Like
I
Food's pretty
don't
good.
snack, but I do eat fast, and I love food, but I don't snack. I don't know.
I'll eat a big ass meal and then I'll get a snack. Like I'm a freak. Like
I will rarely snack. Like it's super rare for me that I'll take a snack.
if you put a plate with a bunch of cheese and different meats in front of me, it will be gone within like an hour. Like I'll just sit there and just munch on that shit.
I do eat fast as well. Like I do eat fast. I think it's a gamer thing. You just fucking munch food to go next game.
Yeah.
Fucking
I was
inhale
fucking
food.
muted, dude. Holy shit, I was sitting there, I was talking, dude. Oh my god.
What you
Oh, we're
talking
just
about?
talking over you. You're getting annoyed.
Yeah, and I was like, no, I wasn't annoyed. I was like, damn, dude, okay, never mind. I guess you guys don't like peanuts and raisins.
Peanuts are
No,
good,
peanuts and
raisins or
raisins.
whatever.
I thought you said penis and raisins.
Penis, love penis though.
Dude, I was
Penis, dude.
lost. Headshot body knocked in. I'm shooting blanks with that guy.
Fucking hell.
I'm full sending. You guys ready?
It's 2 teams, bro.
I'm gonna show you guys this.
Yeah,
Hey,
you
2
show it.
people. I tried one. I stuck
Well, that
one.
was
I stuck
insane.
2. 2 of them. 2 of them. Oh.
Back here on for a bit.
I'm feeling sturdy, bro. Let me tell you. Dude,
They're so low.
yeah, our player is so low, dude.
What is so low, bro?
Top
What
left,
is
top left, top left, in the corner.
what is so low when I headshot body I'm
That
fucking
is-
crypto?
That is 70 flesh on one guy and 2 crack.
I don't want to talk about it.
They're so low, dude. I headshot body the crypto with wouldn't
I slid in, and you heard 5 PK shots. Guess how much damage came out of them?
Oh
49.
no, dude.
Close, 33. Like,
I was
That's why they weren't low anymore, I'm sure. That's not my bad. I struck 3 of them with 70 flesh on one guy, dude.
dude, my nades did all my damage.
Monday was like, watch this! Dead.
I watched this, I throw 2 arc stars, stick 1, and then crack 2 others. There's no shot that's not low, dude.
Dude. I mean, they
Oh
just
my
shooting.
God.
I kept missing. I'm just like, yo, I'm sturdy. Like,
I have to pee though. Holy shit, dude.
the food's here. Let's go.
Oh, nice.
Watch this. Lobby. Mande walking around. Okay, guys, now I'm gonna show you how the lobby looks like. Hi, kitty. Takis are busting, dude. They be busting. What up, Soba? Fanboy meetup in Japan. There's gonna be a fan meetup. This summer. Alright, let's see what the mystery box has. Fucking open this shit up. Oh, it smells so
I know you guys don't
good,
have
though.
Taco Bell, but surely you've at least heard of the Mountain Dew flavored Baja Blast, right?
I know what Mountain Dew is. I don't think I would like Mountain Dew because I don't like sweet drinks.
No, like the flavor specifically.
I don't know about it. I don't know
It's
how
called
it
Baja
tastes.
Blast. It's like only at Taco Bell, I think.
I'm opening
It
this
is
sour candy
correct.
mystery box. Let's see what I got. Toxic waste, orange, nuclear fusion. What is that?
I have no idea what that is.
Crybaby sour mini drinks. Lemon heads.
Lemon heads are ass.
Blue ras popping candy, razzlers.
Nice.
Ooh, a lollipop, a sour lollipop. Sweet and sour. A bunch of. What are these? Like. What are they called? Sour punch? Sour punch?
Oh! That's them!
Haribo.
I got earlier. Sour Punch Straw.
Oh yeah, those, I already tried those before.
Oh.
There's a bunch of them. They're really good. Also Haribo, we just have Haribo over here. Like Haribo's really good.
Is that a Haribo thing?
No, Haribo is there's also like a Haribo package
Haribo's very
with the
good.
sour gold bears from Haribo, but
Yeah.
I like
Haribo's
it.
really good.
I didn't know they had those. I didn't know they made.
Someone's sliding on me?
Isn't Haribo Danish?
I think it's I don't know if it's Danish, but it's European for sure.
Where did that Q come from?
Oh,
There's
here?
three
That
guys.
way.
Two are cracked.
Dude, how are they all three sucking each other's dick?
Yo, get me
man?
on the flank. Get me on the flank. I'm on the flank. Let's go. Get in that shit, boys.
Getting in the shit, getting in the shit. Give me 88. Surfing on his head, bro.
On.
I was surfing on his head, dude. Crypto drone?
You know they're like, oh fuck.
220.
You know they're like, why the fuck is the Gibby behind us, bro?
Dude, we got flanked by the fattest man on the planet.
Oh my god, this fucking Mountain Dew is hitting so hard. Ugh.
T leader Mountain Dew. They're down here, to hear me. Oh, that's a very good nade right
I
there.
made it off.
Oh,
I hit you in the face!
Body headshot. This guy's one right here. I'm going back. Oh yeah, you guys got that.
Yeah, I fucking got my ass. Crypto low, crypto
I
100.
had the full Phoenix.
Crypto's
I got the
low,
Gibby.
last guy's low.
Nice.
Hit the 100. You need to hurry the fuck up. There you go. I've never tried this toxic waste nuclear fusion version.
That's
like
a more sour one, I think.
I tried the yellow one. The yellow one was really sour. What the fuck is the orange one then? Am I gonna fucking die?
I don't know. I haven't had it. That's got to be new.
They sent you some, dude. That motherfucker sent you some crazy shit, dude.
No, it's a
that's gotta be
mystery
new.
box, so like he didn't even pick this. It was just random.
Damn, I gotta buy
Uh,
my fucking.
I'm definitely
That
taking
shit-
out this lollipop.
Have you tried? Dude, you should try the Toe of Satan. That's pretty good.
What?
So
Toe of
isn't
Satan.
that
Isn't that a pepper?
hot?
No, it's a hot one. 9 million Scoville units, dude.
Yeah, my ass. I
Oh,
ain't
the
trying that shit.
lollipop. Yeah.
Yeah, I done that one. That's not good, dude.
Didn't you throw
That's
up?
crazy. Oh yeah, I threw up. I had it. I had it in for 2.5 minutes. I think it was, or 3.5.
Bro, this lollipop
And I
is
think I'll-
massive, but it's not sour. It's sweet.
Hey, the lollipop's massive.
It's all over my
What's wrong
mouth.
with that, dude?
All over the place, dude.
Oh, dude, it's too big and for a mouth, dude, can't fit it.
Well,
Wait, do you
Oh,
guys
yeah.
have you have Pop Rocks over there?
Yeah,
yeah.
I just ate them the other day actually.
Dude, I could be tweaking, but I think I feel like I remember there being sour Pop Rocks
I've never tried sour ones.
at some point.
You motherfuckers probably have deep fried pop rocks in NA.
We have fried butter.
Yeah, that's fucking
Fried ice
fucking
cream.
good. This fried butter is fucking disgusting, dude.
It's apparently
Vile.
delicious. I don't know.
Fuck this guy.
Uh-oh. I don't?
I'm gonna choke on this lollipop.
Oh, yeah?
I'm choking, dude.
Is that a warning or a promise?
Promise.
Oh! Oh, shit!
Give me cracked.
Hold on. I hit him 50.
I have 12 this cube right here.
Yo, I got you up here. I got the
He's
knock.
1 HP. I hit him 99. 99 on his
win.
bald head motherfucker.
Give me right here, Mandy. Oh,
Ah.
no.
No.
Oh, he's griefing. Climbing on your back.
No, dude, what is that?
24 plus 77. It's not even 99. I hit him 101. I can't even mathematically.
Now they're dead.
This fucking lollipop is not even sour. This is a bait, bro.
Max making us Americans sound really fat. Dude, look, I'm not making this shit up. It exists.
Dude,
It's real.
Y'all motherfuckers crazy over there.
Like, we did it to ourselves, bro. It's just
what?
carnival food.
Yeah, you guys made carnival food into fucking everyday food. That's what you guys did.
That's pretty true.
I like lollipops.
Wow.
You guys like lollipops?
Yeah, I don't know. They make my teeth hurt. I don't know
Yeah,
why.
if you bite them, but if you lick them, they don't.
Yeah, I never lick.
Hey, don't lick that. Your girlfriend must hate you.
I don't lick, I bite, dude.
You
Oh,
never
your
catch
girlfriend
Mandy
fucking
lacking
hates
like
your
that.
ass.
Yeah, you never catch me. I eat ice cream with teeth too. You're never gonna catch me lacking sucking on some shit, dude. Ain't no way. Ain't no way I'm sucking on anything, dude.
You don't lick, you bite it. That's what you do to your homies? You bite?
Yeah, of course. Do you guys have spicy nuggets on McDonald's now?
Yeah,
You what?
they were good.
Spicy nuggets from McDonald's.
Yeah,
They don't have it here anymore.
Oh, dude, we have it in
They were
Denmark
pretty
now.
good in
They're
my
so
opinion.
good. They're
but they're
so
not that
good. We have it
spicy.
in
They're not
Denmark.
that spicy though.
No, they're not. But they're like.
But they're different
I don't know,
flavor.
I feel like if they were too spicy, it wouldn't be good either. I feel like it's just a good amount of spice. Like you can feel it a little bit, but it doesn't ruin the taste. or
It
anything.
changes the flavor a lot.
Yeah, it's really good. Really
And
good.
it's not bad flavor, it's good.
I died.
No, it didn't.
What kind of mouse you guys have over there in NA? Rates 100 or 80 or something.
80 on octane.
Oh, dude, what the fuck was that? Headshot, dude.
Dude, what kind of mouse do they have over there in NA, bro? I can't even fit this lollipop in my mouth.
What kind of what?
Mouths.
Oh, they got big mouths in
big
there.
old mouth, motherfucker.
You've seen the fucking politicians over there? Motherfucker, they're juiced, dude.
Yeah,
Ah,
big
my
one.
bad. I don't know anything about politics. Relax.
Above me?
About to get some K-Kona ass takes in your chat.
Yeah.
Okay, corner. Hey, who threw a nade?
Yeah, damn it. I knew-
Oh, so there was no one here.
Nah, I threw one.
Yeah, please no politics in chat, dude. I cannot handle that right now.
I'm not a politics guru either. Go watch.
I thought you were a politics major yet, Mandy.
Oh yeah, true. I
Seems like
forgot. Yeah, go watch Asan if you want to watch some politics, dude.
Yeah, dude, go ahead, dude. I do not want to know. I don't even want to know, you know. Don't even come at me.
Damn.
I'm just a fucking idiot that plays games online. I don't care about politics.
True.
Done.
I only care about if they pick some people that make me pay more taxes.
Yeah, they make him pay more taxes and I'll become a fucking guru in a second, dude. But
Yeah, dude.
if
I'm
not, then I
fucking
don't care.
out there advertising everything, dude. Changing my stream to Danish also. Get as many Danish people as possible to vote for the same one I want to.
Goddamn taxes, K-Kona.
Yeah. Fuck, I want to go to Texas, dude.
Texas. You wanna move
It's
to us in
hella
Texas,
flat.
Mande?
Yeah, flat? Dude. Dude, Albralelie. The highest point in Denmark is like 800 meters above sea level or something. And that's like a 200-meter tall
Lower in
mountain.
Texas, I could be wrong.
Thank you, Darkson.
It's not even a fucking mountain. It's a hill. That's the highest point in Denmark. It's a hill.
The Denmark's flat.
Yeah. It's
Croatia's-
snowing right now.
Croatia has some mountains, but not much. We are more like a sea type of country, coastal country. Denmark's a flat country. No booba at all, huh? Let's go
Hate to
gardens.
see it.
Is it Netherlands
Are
like?
you? Wait. Yeah, you have a artisan here, right?
Yeah.
I have 2. Do you want to bring one?
I mean, sure.
It's never used. I haven't even opened it.
Yeah, sure.
People hiding here, they're having sexual intercourse.
Why?
Landing in the bubbly.
I have a Mozambique.
Give us one.
Killed one.
Gig on a bow.
Where are they?
Oh, bam.
Nice. No
Guy
problem,
flying
guys.
in, I'm killing him.
Yeah.
Clip.
They can't hit me. They're dog shit. I'm still full HP, guys. Damn.
If you bring me a mouse pad, I'll get you more food. You still buy the kebab though.
Yeah. Wait 2 seconds. Let me look. There's a here and a half.
Dude, I can't believe you never had a kebab. I can't wait to. You can't eat a kebab without us. We have to witness your face when you eat it. Okay?
I'm picky, so I might not like it.
Oh man, you're going fucking like you like meat.
Of course I like meat.
You like sauce.
Yeah.
Depends
It's
how
a
much.
here and a half, but it's an extra soft one.
It's
Fine,
like
I use extra soft.
Alright.
the sauce that
It's
you
the
can
red. It's the red
pick
one, right?
for kebab. You can pick
Oh,
a
mine's
hot
black.
sauce.
No, mine's red. It'll probably still be
For
fine.
kebab, you can pick a hot sauce, which is a red sauce, or a white sauce, which is kind of like a.
Is
white
kebab
sauce-
basically like shawarma?
It's yeah. You can get
But
you can
better.
get different like you
Like,
can
I've
get
had-
different kebab meat. Like
I've had it-
you can get lamb, chicken, all that shit.
I might have had something similar. It comes in a wrap though, right?
You
Yeah.
can pick a wrap or a
Okay,
doner.
I've had it. I've had it in like a just like you just eat it with a fork over like rice.
Oh.
It's
Yeah,
like it's
bro.
like chicken shawarma over rice.
Yeah, but I normally eat lamb shawarma. Yeah.
You can
don't
also have it in doner, which is like a kind of like a bun. No, wait, what is doner, Mande? Is that a bun?
It's bread.
Döner kebab. It's like a
It's like
it's not really like a it's not really like a bun or whatever, but it's like a pizza bread.
yeah,
Yeah, it's
similar.
like thin puffy bread, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, but they make it like a sandwich out of it.
Yeah, yeah. I've seen those before. I know what they are. I haven't had it, but I've seen them.
long
Actually, I
have
like
you
actually
been
watched a video recently about them. Like a guy that
Well,
was making them.
Dude, sorry that we're talking about food, chat. What are we supposed to do? Just run around do nothing?
Yeah,
sit in
chat. It's like
silence?
3 o'clock in here or something. 6, 4.
Four.
It's
five.
yeah, it's 16:40 right now.
Yeah, I mean like it's lunchtime, motherfuckers. We're giving you food ideas. Be grateful.
My child molding because we've been talking about food for 2 hours. Guys, we have a LAN coming. This is so important, you know?
It's called passion.
What was this, Kamaz? What was that? I have a
She just
purple
ran
bag.
his pockets.
I have a purple bag. I pick up a gold. and I drop it and get a blue. Holy shit, dude. Oh my god. That's what nice guys get, the guys. Don't be nice, be mean. Selfish.
Actually fucking skimazed.
Why am I hungry again? There's nothing wrong with me, dude. I can eat all the time.
I've been fucking. Oh,
90 on one?
I've been licking this lollipop for an hour now. I feel like. What do you have, purple and red? Oh, they're still
I'm
here.
dropping.
What am I?
Wait, am I bricked? Why did it come like
They're in front of me here.
Alright. Alright, dude. I don't want to talk about it.
He's holding an arc. Purple armor, red.
90.
120 on the octane. No octane. Crypto. The rate is below.
Nine. She dropped, yeah.
She's climbing up behind you guys. Get it, Mac.
You just got that. It's Jonah Hill. Fog.
I can't wait for everyone to come over, bro. And for I know how much earlier you're gonna come, Mac. So we're gonna be there like 21st, like a week earlier. Let us know when
I'm not
you
sure.
when you come, so we can go
Yeah, I'm not sure.
do shit.
Dude, I'm like horrified of COVID. So I will probably be an anxious mess, but I want to do things.
Yeah. As long as we're doing shit together, like with the boys, and not just
Yeah.
fucking going out and meeting a bunch of weird people, you know?
We're just not gonna go like in any open public spaces. We're just gonna. Like,
Because all of us need to have a negative corona test to be able to travel.
Yeah.
So, like, you know, if we just hang out with us and shit and don't go out and fucking, I know some of these horn dogs start talking to girls and shit, dude, you know?
yeah, we gotta put that shit on leash.
Yeah, 100%, dude. That motherfucker's scary.
Is he?
Yeah.
What
Yes.
the hell?
That seems very scary, dude. He can
You
smell
make it sound
girls
way
10
worse
miles
than
away.
it is. You make it
crazy.
sound way worse.
You can smell the pussy through the wall, dude.
Tajim would throw an entire tournament just for a little bit of whiff, dude.
Dude, you guys better pray that there's not like a tourney in Amsterdam or something, dude. You'd actually lose him. Dude, he's gone. You land,
Tashin, dude.
you land, get off the plane, Tashin's gone.
Yeah, you're Tashin, you want some? Where the fuck is he, dude? I'm like already bolting in a taxi towards all the crazy places.
He's in the red light district, dude.
He's got a map of it. He knows where every place is that he wants to hit.
He knows all the people there too. He has all the numbers and shit, dude.
He's got appointments set up.
They're fighting over here, West. Nah, definitely just be
Okay,
careful with
that's
like, you know?
I think we should just hang out within hotels, dude.
Yeah.
Or like,
Ooh, dude. 9 boys in a hotel room? Hey, count me in.
That is
or the boot camp, you know? Because the boot camp will have like our own space.
I'll be in the boot camp a lot.
Have you guys ever seen those like internet cafes where like you can get like they have a bar?
Yeah, that's what this boot camp has as well. I'm pretty
Oh, we have
I knocked one.
sick.
sure. They have like their own lounge area or whatever.
Catch me hitting vaudeville with the boys.
Double bubble, double bubble. Love you.
I'm dying. I don't even know from where. Oh, down here.
Headshot one.
I'm getting crazy shots right now.
Double one.
That Puffin is one shot.
I headshot him. You're a liar.
Yeah, I'm getting crazy shots right now.
Body shot him. Body
He's
shot him
really
4
low.
times.
He's really low now. I got him on 1.
I'm in that shit, baby.
Dude, I'm
I
going
body shot him like
crazy.
8
right
times,
now.
dude.
Put him down. Put him down. Oh! Dude. Good team. Get me running up.
Block it.
Excuse me. Excuse
Thank
me.
you.
Give me crack, give me crack, give me crack. I'm going to die, man. I'm dying, I'm dying.
Dude,
You're a fucking monkey, dude.
Dude, I was going crazy.
it's spinning me, man. Dude, he's
Cosa,
controller
arigato.
looting. It's a controller. Give me.
We're actually gonna have 2 managers come with us.
Oh! Come on, Mandy.
Ziggurat Amanda is yellow mostly. Yellow or blue.
No, Mandy's gonna get. Oh my. No!
Oh, no! Dude. Oh no, dude.
You were going crazy until you didn't.
Now they're dead.
Mandy had to have like started holding his breath at some point in there. And it
I
caught up
didn't
to
breathe
him
a
and
single
started whiffing.
I didn't breathe a single time. I got lightheaded.
Who gets to breathe, bro?
I just got the world record for holding my breath the longest. That was
And he
5
died
minutes.
and said, fucking.
I don't know how we didn't finish that fight faster. I was going crazy in the first fight, dude.
Oh,
The Papa
shit,
was
dude.
one shot like 3 times.
Dude, Albralelie headshot him and I bodied him, dude. Papa is still full HP after that. Block it? And then I get hit by full one, dude.
Dude, I thought you were gonna play like in the middle of the box, so I blocked you right, and then you just swerved into the nade and died. I hope that the venue has good food, because Poland was fucking horrible food.
Do you know where the venue is?
I have no idea.
I was told by an insider
leak.
source.
I don't know if you can leak.
I can send it to you
Be careful.
if you don't say it out loud.
Okay.
He's gonna leak it, dude. And then blame it on you, bro.
Oh, it's gonna be announced. The venue's gonna be announced in like today anyway. But
Motherfucker leak it to Albralelie and not me. That's crazy.
I already put in our fucking Scars fucking Discord with all the fucking managers. So I don't know. You're just
we
not
did?
reading. Here.
Yeah.
Ooh,
Where?
that's kind of hog.
Yeah, it's really nice. It has a lot of restaurants and shit. Pretty cool.
That. It's there?
Mm-hmm.
Oh.
According
Swedish,
to a credible source.
Alright.
Kinda sad that there's no audience, but it makes sense, yeah. I think audience would be crazy. Whenever we can have audience for Apex lands, our Apex lands are gonna go crazy, dude.
Oh yeah.
There's gonna be some Fortnite type shit, dude. Fortnite's World Cup was crazy, dude.
Yeah.
Fucking hell, dude. That was the craziest esports event.
And
that's
I
ever
remember
been on.
being on the bus coming back from our venue. Like when we finished playing, it was like also around the same time that Booga won. I remember being on the bus and looking at Twitter and seeing that Booga won the fucking
Oh yeah, dude.
World Cup.
I had this.
and was like,
I had
oh
this
my
weird.
God.
I had this weird obsession of like how many followers he gained and shit. I would
Dude,
sit
he
there
went
and
up
I would,
like
like,
hundreds of thousands, bro.
yeah, in like minutes.
Single night. Yeah.
I would sit there and I would reload it as a 20,000
Yeah.
in like 1 second.
Yeah, we were doing that too. Me, Jordan, and Hal, we're all like, dude, holy shit. And we're like, what?
I'm dying,
It
I'm
was
dying, I'm
insane.
dying, I'm dying.
Just
And look
don't
at Hal
let
now.
him. Yep.
Got all of us now.
101 guys.
Got 2 motherfuckers pushing me, hello?
Oh, that's a different team.
Fuck the bad.
Good. There's 2 up there, up here. Okay.
Yeah, two assholes
Oh.
that pushed me. Oh, it's 3 now. Give is cracked, wrist almost cracked.
On a Glizzy on the head.
Pathfinder is cracked. I cracked all of them.
Glizzy sizzling. Glizzy sizzling.
28 here on this guy.
This motherfucker
Push
eagle
him
challenging.
out. I'm with you.
I'm in that shit, baby.
Knock one.
I'm dead, dude. This guy is actual fucking degen. Actual baiting fuck. Please kill him. Please resurrection.
Stud. Frosted Flakes is down. There should be a new team.
There should be, yeah.
This lollipop is massive. I'm dead, bro. Bubble me?
I don't have it.
When do you get
Hundred.
it?
Time. 2 seconds.
This guy wants me dead. This guy wants me dead. Holy shit, what a... I could say words.
It's out. Get out. Hold on.
Yeah, we both fucked that guy.
Why did I just turn into Mickey
Look
Mouse?
at his nade.
on
Look
your
at his
side?
nade.
Yeah, that's horrible.
Nothing.
He's on the bed.
Shut up. What do you mean horrible?
It was fucking horrible.
Yeah, I zoned him.
Yeah, he's zoning him.
When you
I'll
control
say that
it,
shit-
What?
I'll say that shit in League when I ult backwards. I'm like zoning ult.
What are you saying, Harper?
are you
Oh, who just threw a nade?
controller, dude?
Yeah, me? You saw that?
Yeah.
You liked it?
Uh-huh. Okay, there's 4 to 6 private rooms in the boot camp that we can use.
Hey, private rooms? Hey.
Oh, word.
So we don't have
Hey.
to be in the open, you know?
4 to 6 private rooms with the homies, dude.
Can you shit on my side?
Oh shit.
41
shit on
purple
your
and one
side?
close. Right here. 41 purple. Any heavy ammo, 12 bullets.
Those
There's a guy
cans.
close to me. Oh, this
got
is not
that.
good. This is not good.
Okay, very bad.
It's not looking good for the boys. I'm sliding over.
Oh, we're split.
Oh!
Oh, it's not looking good, Mac.
Dead.
Yeah, give this crack.
Help! Dude! Win it, please!
Is this guy
God.
1 HP? Is this guy 1 HP? Huh?
You
Oh
team.
shit, I'm dead.
It's worth. I don't care. We won the fight.
Oh, I get this, dude.
Wait, it's 2 teams. It's not even 1. It's 2.
I've
Get
never
him,
not
Banner.
gotten this, dude. I always
Path
get
is
this.
chasing you. You're being chased by Path. He turned around to finish me because I'm a Gibby. Come on, dude. Dude, you just missed a massive shot in the down Gibby.
Where's the third party?
Oh.
Oh, there it is. That was sick from me, dude. I went crazy.
You caught them off guard.
Motherfucker, what are you doing? Help your team. What's up, guys?
Oh, what the
Walking
fuck?
through, baby. What's up?
He's gone.
Alright, peace.
That's the dumbest shit I've ever seen in my life. Sometimes dumb works, dude. Think about it.
Oh man, spread lobbies, dude.
Dude, I have this... My neck hurts, man.
We go back, dude. You took my empty purple, dude. My empty red, I mean.
Oh, dude. That was good. You ever like massage in a little place or something that just like annoys you and then it's gone when you're done massaging it? Or is that just me?
That shit goes crazy.
Who's lava looting?
I don't know. Not me.
Not me.
Not us. Oh, he's lost. Why is he queuing?
60. Kill him. And let me get assist too.
Rob on me. Oh, back on him. I can help.
We'll be
How
right
did
there.
he grapple out of my
Down, down,
terror?
down, down.
Thank you.
90 on Watson. I'm in that shit, baby.
Watson was low.
Let's go. Let's go.
Watson 1.
Oh my god, I'm aimbotting.
That's behind the wall.
Watson is
Sorry,
45
overdoing the
purple.
land.
That's behind the wall right there. I
Overdoing the
saw
land
that.
because I got banned for cheating.
Nice.
Finally. Holy shit, dude.
Holy shit.
I've written your name to hideouts like 30 times. Holy fuck, that took a while, man.
I literally just flicked pre-firing and just fried that kid through the wall.
Dude, Eva used the worst shot in the game. Dude.
No, it's not.
So bad, dude.
It's not that bad.
Dude,
Well,
Why
how
do
many
you think
points
it's so
was
bad?
Mande, with Eva, you know, in the last game of tournament, last tournament a day, I had Eva in my hands and I fucking insta-killed the Gibbies. So in that case, it was bossing, you know? But we still lost the fight. So we lost the fight because I had Eva in my hands. It's just a bad omen.
Oof.
His match is
you
superior
guys
to 2K,
had-
yeah. What do you say?
One other game, if you guys had one other game that you could go pro in outside of Apex, what would it be? What would you have chosen?
You want you change the rule set real quick. You make equally as much as money in no matter what game you choose. So if
Or
you in
more.
League of Legends, you choose
Yeah,
you make
like a
you make
sustainable pro career.
yeah. You won't make more depending on what game you choose. Right?
Yeah,
So
yeah,
I would just fucking be like, oh, Dota 2, and then just fucking make trillions of dollars.
yeah. I mean, like your passion game. Like if you could be a pro in it and like live comfortably, sustainable.
Any 5v5 search and destroy game, like TS, Valorant, any that type of game.
Okay. Wait, on me. I'm ratting. I died.
He died.
Dude, they body blocked me trying to get to the pad. It's dude. They actually jumped in front of me.
Oh, they're
What
horny
the
and fat.
fuck? What is
They're
that?
horny and fat. Their mom's
they're
so
aping.
fat.
Oh,
90
right
purple
here.
and Octane. Octane
I'm
crap.
fucking out.
They're just fucking inting, man.
You win these, Mandy.
Oh yeah, 100%. I got both.
120
Man.
knocked.
You ready?
Yeah. God, I'm losing faith, Mandy. You'd never expect a repeat.
Oh, what? I
Give you a-
headshot him. Oh,
He headshotted you back, dude.
yeah.
That's the problem.
Why are we not getting third party there? That's the real question. That's their only damage. That's an us almost. Holy shit, dude.
Plus 2 RP though, we're going crazy gains.
Being heartbroken is so last year.
Hey Tuzi.
Yeah, I think I'll book with Tashin later.
You did already or?
No, I'll book with him later.
Yeah. You guys are gonna have to wait for my ass. Huh.
I think we're just gonna fucking, I don't know. It depends on when Tashin wants to go.
I mean, you can time it so you come at the same time as me or similar time as me.
Yeah.
I'm arriving at 10 p.m.
Dude, no shot. I'm arriving at 10 p.m., dude. I'm arriving way earlier, dude. I'm gonna be there like fucking 11 in the morning.
Why?
I'm gonna eat a bunch of food.
Oh.
I feel like getting there late at night is like actually a throw.
Yeah.
It's like,
Is what?
Late
because
evening.
I sleep on the plane, so like, If I'm waking up and it's nighttime, like my schedule is already chalked. Like it's actually just wrapped. I will be sleeping at the venue.
For me, it's fine because I leave at 3 p.m. my time. And I come at 10 because I have layovers.
Yeah, I'll leave at like 10 a.m. and be there like 11 a.m. It takes me literally 50 minutes to fly.
Yeah, but you have a direct flight.
Yeah. If I had to get a layover, I'd rather fucking take the bus there.
Bro, because I gotta go to from my city to capital, Zagreb. Then from Zagreb I have to go to Vienna. And then from Vienna I go to Stockholm.
Oh shit, dude.
Good things of us. I might have died. I'm not sure yet. I'm getting boat shot. Yo, I'm throwing hands. I'm throwing hands.
How did I not kill him? There we go. They're rising down here. I got a bot again in me. They're pushing me. All three of them. I fell off the map. But I cracked through them.
It's fine, that's good. I'll take
It's
it
actually really good. That was big brain. Because I'll go up. I took the zip and I got dropped off the zip. Like, what?
Bad news, I think I'm dead.
What's the good news then?
There's no good news.
Oh.
Unfortunately, yeah.
It's only bad news here.
Wait, one more is coming up late. Wait.
Oh, knocked. Oh my god, body headshot.
Oh, my box is gone. I forgot.
Take this bitch.
100? On my back!
Oh no, 100 on him.
Punch them!
There's
No
no
cap,
way.
punch them! They're low!
Where's my box?
There's no way. He's downstairs, he's downstairs.
I can do this. I can do this. Nice. No one touched my
Yeah.
box. Let's go.
Could have done it with your hands.
He's resting now.
Oh.
You're gonna shot
Oh
in the
my
back.
god, now you got third. Oh
Don't worry. I got this. Shall go
Oh,
back?
no. Oh no, he found me. Grab down the swap. That's Serdal.
They're coming now. They're fucking coming, dude.
Dude,
They're fucking terrible! Dude, the other team should help me!
Oh my god.
This team is fucking bad!
Holy shit, I'm fucked. They're so bad. Dude, I fucked Shadell and IG, dude.
That was funny. Let me get water,
My
bro.
bad. Oh my god. Holy shit, dude. Those guys were nuts, dude. Green. Okay. Go back.
Back in time. So, I'm getting my booster this Friday. Let's go. I'm gonna be out of commission for like 2 days. Polk. Konnichiwa, put in it. What do you mean, what flavored?
Raspberry cheesecake, dude. Oh my god.
I told you RPR 6-1. Pfizer smooth. Pfizer. This Friday, I'm getting my 5G, bro.
5G?
I got a booster.
Hmm.
You already got yours, right?
Yeah.
Gonna go fast.
He landed on the better weapon.
Still need to get all my shit done. I'm not looking forward to it.
1 HP in a dash. I'm selling. Kill him. Oh, they're above! Oh, nice audio, dude. Right above you, Octane. Just absolute bot at the game.
Hate to see that.
Unlucky.
I swear, people that land on energy weapons are just God's favorite, dude.
I landed on
Straight
2
up.
energy weapons and I chose the fucking Hemlock instead. I don't know why.
Yeah, Havoc off spawn is fucking broken, dude. You die instantly.
Yeah, I was on a Devo.
Do you like Cheetos or Takis better? Mac.
I'm a Cheeto man. Takis are like too crunchy. They like hurt my teeth after a while. They're like hard as
crunchy?
fuck.
Crunchy Cheetos or soft Cheetos?
I'm more of a puff man myself.
Sounding NA, but have the most EU teeth.
Dude. True. My teeth are fucked. I hate it.
Ooh, pee pee poo poo.
Go to the dentist. You're like a millionaire.
Yeah, I need to like, dude. I wish it was that simple in NA. In NA, like you go to the dentist and like they'll just like make shit up, just to like try to get more money from you. It's like you actually have to find like a good dentist.
They do the same shit here. But in my opinion,
Denmark pays like 80% of it in Denmark.
in my opinion, I just take the L and get my teeth fixed.
Yeah, I mean like, I'll go to a dentist. I'll be like, you know, that tooth is fucked, man. It's fucked. You're gonna need to be, you know, knocked out. We're gonna take it out. We're gonna do all this shit. And then I go to another dentist and they're like, tooth's fine. Like, so I don't know.
Oh.
I don't know. Dentists will just straight lie. Also, it probably doesn't help that when I was a kid, both my parents are like afraid of like dentists, or they don't like teeth. So I didn't go to the dentist for like 10 years.
What the fuck?
Yeah, I didn't go to the dentist for a long time when I was a kid. My parents never brought me.
So for me, it's more like when I was younger, I used to go on regular checkups all the fucking time. As I got older, I got lazier and I stopped going to checkups. But I've never in my life had like bad teeth, like, you know, broken.
I went to the dentist once when I was a kid and I got 4 teeth pulled. And then since then I
only
went
got
one more time and I had to get another tooth pulled.
I had like 9 holes at a point at the same time.
I had to get I think it's called a root canal recently because my teeth were broken, but you couldn't see it. It was in between the teeth. So we didn't know that it was the tooth was fucked up until it like went really bad, you know?
Yeah, he's well, literally one shot, literally one shot.
Open.
Yeah, please.
The other one was also headshotted.
This guy is
One,
just
what the
OD'd
fuck?
on
2 or 1 HP up here.
fucking-
I can't name. That sucks. Knock one.
Knock
I thought they
one.
were coming to me and they zipped up on your side. I'm coming.
Oh, he's really trying to finish me, this guy.
I'm in the shit, baby.
He hit me for 102 with one.
Dude. This knockdown shield. I literally went 0 for 3.
Dude, this guy hit me for 102 with a no scope.
That was
triple
diff.
take.
That dude's movement was just hurting my brain.
He's resing.
Yeah.
He's resting on the left. I literally didn't hit him all.
How is he not
Oh
dead?
my.
Oh my god, man.
If my bow hit more than what 20, he died.
Yeah, last time I went to the dentist, I had to get one of my molars pulled. I don't know what's up with my molars, but they always break. Like when I was a kid, I got the 4 teeth I got pulled were all of my like top row molars.
I'm weird. I had wisdom teeth pain, and I tanked that shit. I let it grow out, and I tanked it, and it's gone. I didn't.
I have a wisdom tooth coming in, and it doesn't hurt at all. It's like growing where I lost that one tooth. It feels like it's coming in a little sideways, like he's Tokyo drifting into that spot, but it doesn't hurt.
You know, I don't know. I fucking just tanked the fucking pain from wisdom tooth. Didn't get him pulled, and my dentist told me that all that bullshit that they tell you that your wisdom teeth can push your other teeth is fucking bullshit. There's just no way that a single tooth can push that many teeth. Physically impossible. But he said the only thing that like a problem about wisdom teeth is if you leave them out, if they grow out weirdly, they can basically they get infected all the time. So you gotta keep fucking like if they keep getting infected, you want to pull them out. No, it cannot.
Get my 4
Your one wisdom tooth cannot push a row of entire fucking teeth, guys. Stop fucking digging it. A fucking dentist, a specialized private dentist, has explained the whole situation to me, bro. Like, stop smoking dick.
I don't know. Even if my wisdom tooth pushed my teeth together, that would be for the best. Because I have like huge gaps in my teeth. I need braces really bad.
Yeah. I thought about getting braces in my bottom, bro. My bottom was... Fuck, dude. It's like someone took my teeth and dice rolled that bitch and threw it in there. That's crazy.
Mine just have spaces.
Yeah, mine don't have space. Mine are so put together that I have to floss 2 times a day or I get holes in between.
You know that newer generations that are being born right now are being born without wisdom teeth. I don't know if you know that. A lot of new kids don't have wisdom teeth at all.
You don't need it for anything else, dude. They're dumb.
Yeah, wisdom teeth are useless. And it's finally like getting rid of them evolution wise. I don't like PKs anyway.
Oh, dude, punch me one more fucking time now, end your entire career.
Guys, I'm shit on.
Did you leave me?
Uh-oh. Down you.
Turn my back. Fuck.
Dude, I know where I could have.
Evolution ain't that fucking fast. Steffi, we haven't used our fucking
name is
wisdom
Dual
teeth
Beretta.
in tens of thousands of years. They were useless for a very long amount of time,
Okay.
not 10 years.
Oh, you're dead.
The use of wisdom teeth is it's like from what I know, it's like when we were primal and shit, like they would grow out and help with chowing down food and shit and ripping food and shit. Like eating.
Is that a 1v1 or what? Never mind.
But yeah, nowadays like kids are already like getting like not growing any wisdom teeth like newer generations.
What? Huh?
You wanna like go get the banners or something? That'd be sick.
No.
Can you even make it? Hey,
Yeah, I can.
wisdom teeth are so fucking useless. They're just like pain. Hit him one more time.
That went through his cock. I don't care.
Thanks, Toxic. Through his cocker? What the fuck? Where's my body?
My Pico.
Well, I think there is no picking on your body.
I've been robbed.
There's literally nothing on your body.
Crime.
My mastiff is also gone. That's crazy. Oh no! Oh no! I need all of this.
Hog.
There's a big A. Fuck that! This guy's so fast at loading. I hate him. I need heavies. Nice.
Is vaccine required to travel to Sweden? I don't think
Yeah.
so. What is going on with this guy's shield? I thought it was just a negative COVID test.
No, yeah, you know what?
Oh, it's
I
one or
think
the
you're-
other.
I think you're right, but LGS rules are
You have to be
COVID.
you have to be
Jabbed up.
vaccinated to get in the venue. Okay,
Yeah.
you can go into Sweden with just a negative COVID test. The Sweden by itself doesn't have very strict rules for COVID anymore.
Yeah.
But
You need to be jabbed up to go to the venue.
LGS venue, they said you need to have at least 2 from like one of the verified, what are they called, vaccines. So yeah, you gotta get
Yeah.
jabbed. They right here, better.
I have to get my shit done. I've been like putting it off for so long.
Honestly, it's
How
not that
many
bad.
do you have?
I don't have any, dude. I've been just like super anxious.
Dude, you can't make that, Alb.
I fell off the map.
You know you have to get one, then you have to wait for a long time, right?
It's 2 weeks. You take
Alright.
one, 2 weeks, get the next. I could do it this month. I'd have to
can
do
you
this
do
week though.
You gotta go like instantly.
Me and
bro.
Nadi both have to.
Alright.
You gotta go instantly, so because they might, you know. I don't know
Yeah,
if you
I have to go
get
this
it.
week.
I don't know how it works in NA, but like,
You can just pull up. You can do it
Yeah.
instead of like 24-hour clinic.
okay.
Yeah.
And
I don't go
you-
outside, so I've literally just been fucking hermiting.
Yeah. You probably
Real
heard this a million times, but it's not bad.
Yeah. All my friends
Okay.
told me it's not bad. It's like
Yeah,
at
you can't even
worst,
feel
2
there.
days.
I had a tiny bit of a
Hey,
fever
I'm
after
dying.
my
I'm a
second
dick.
job.
What the
Oh
fuck? There's a whole team waiting for me to come out of the sky.
Oh my god.
He did.
Dude, I
dude.
fat fingered my spacebar, and that's how I jumped off the zip, by the way.
Yeah, I'm getting my 3rd jab soon as well. Okay.
Yeah, they're coming here.
Well, white armor raid. What the fuck?
110 on Ash. They bubble.
No audio, Andy, in my fucking asshole.
Oh, what's up?
I gotta get a dead slide. This is sick.
Okay, that's the second time we get solo give ulted. Relax, dude.
They don't fucking like us, dude.
One got knocked.
Why do I need a 3rd job? I don't need it. I want it. And also my COVID
Crash.
password already, like, I don't have a COVID passport anymore. My COVID passport is invalid because I got my jobs a long time ago.
gonna just take Naughty with me. Be like, motherfucker, we're doing this together.
We're gonna hold hands and shit.
Yeah.
80 purple in this blood on.
You knocked one, right?
Yeah, I knocked it from this team. Blood on.
Oh my fucking god!
Sick boost.
There's a full team next to them and they're not getting shot at.
What was that, man?
What did you just do, man?
What
You
was
just
that?
Dude, there's a
Man,
full
you just
team on the
walked at them and died.
there's a full team on the right. I thought they were like sliding down.
Dude,
Oh my god. I got confused.
my dude actually just bot walked in.
I was not expecting that.
Well, I mean, I know that the booster is gonna fuck me up.
All I know is I'm getting the fucking Pfizer Johnson because that's one that all my friends have.
Yeah, I got Pfizer.
Yeah.
They all got that one, and only one of them was out of commission for like a day. Everyone else was like, I didn't even feel anything. So they
Yeah,
just
I
went
got
about their day and they were fine.
I was just tired. That was it. Yeah, I got. What are they even called? The ones I got.
You get some like weird off-brand shit.
No. I got one of the top tier ones.
Moderna?
No. Pfizer, probably.
Yeah, I mean that's one of the two. There's only like 2 top tier, I think.
Yeah, Pfizer and Moderna. Everything else I heard really shit stories about. I
Moderna,
don't.
I've just heard that you feel like shit after for like a couple days.
I had Pfizer and second shot gave me like a little fever. Then I went to bed, but the next day I was just fine.
But I probably saw it. Don't think about it now. You're
I'm
not sorry
very-
like him.
I'm very prone to fevers though.
I mean, I've only had 2 fevers in my, or 1 fever in my life, and it was like a bad fever. Like it was like 104.3. Yeah, I've only had 1 fever.
How?
I don't get sick.
You're sick at land though.
True.
That's actually true.
Is
It
that
wasn't
your
like
fever?
I don't know if it was. I didn't take my temps, so I don't know if I had a fever or
I'm
if I had
pretty sure
heat
you
stroke.
had a fever, bro. Motherfucker,
probably-
You
you-
look
yeah,
like you're about to die. Not gonna lie.
That's true.
I was ready to
So
jump
I guess
in and take your spot here.
that's okay. That's my second ever fever then. The other fever was like a 104.3 when I was a kid, or when I was like 16.
I don't know.
I don't know what that
Fahrenheit, bro.
means.
100 or 103.4, not 104.3. My brain would be frying.
I had.
Yeah,
I
someone
think
translate that into Celsius.
my
It's
my
hot.
craziest one was 41.5, I think, Celsius.
Yeah,
And I
I
had
get
to get
really,
rushed to the hospital.
I get really fucking hardcore. What are they called? Fevers. To the point where I was younger, I would get a fever, and my mom would like shower me in cold ass showers to lower my body temp, so I didn't have to get rushed to the hospital.
Yeah, all I know is my shit was cooking. I was
Yeah,
I was
I had-
ready to go. 104F is 40C. Yeah.
Yeah.
All I know is my mom who's a nurse was like, if it goes any higher, you're going to the hospital. Like,
Yeah. I had to get picked up by my friend, my parents' friends, and drive me to the hospital instantly because I had 41.5. I had glandular fever. Yeah, I had glandular fever.
I don't know what that is.
It's like it's the thing you get from like fucking what do you call it?
I'm gonna die here. They're just like ego challenging everything. Their teammate's dead. I'm pretty sure I just killed their teammate. What are you guys doing? Just ego challenging.
Dude, the wingmans are just fucking blind.
Dude, I should have picked up the shotgun right there. I thought it was a duo only.
Wait, what kind of shit did you have, man? What did you say?
Glandular fever.
What the fuck is that, dude?
It's pretty normal. It's kissing disease.
Oh,
I know
that's
that.
fucking that's mono
Mononucleosis.
Yeah,
or
I guess.
Epstein-Barr, whatever you want to call it. Yeah, I have that.
I had that.
Fucking.
And mine was super bad, apparently.
I never got a
My-
fever from that, but I
you
slept
get?
for like a week. I was sleeping
My-
for like 18 hours a day. For like a
My
week.
liver was fucking 3 times as big, and I couldn't do anything.
Yeah,
And
my,
I had
liver,
like
my liver
these,
got inflamed too.
I had these dots everywhere in my body. My entire body was filled with them, everywhere. I had my ass and my cock, everything, dude.
So who were
It
you?
was crazy, dude.
Who were you fucking?
I was looking like a polka dot.
Who did
That
you
was
kiss?
nuts. No one. I got it from someone that fucking coughed on the street.
Liar.
So yeah, no, why would I lie? But I got that shit and I insta get, dude. It was crazy. And when I came back to my boarding school or whatever, people had put police tape over my bed and said, "This is where the sick man lives." Crazy, dude.
Shut.
These motherfuckers, dude. Nah, that was crazy. No, but I rarely get sick, but when I get sick, I get really sick, like crazy sick, dude. About to die sick. So
That's how I am too.
yeah, I had my appendix removed. That was the worst time my life ever.
I haven't had that happen yet.
Yeah.
Hopefully
No.
never.
I'm hoping
Yeah.
to keep that Johnson where it is right now.
My dad had that shit as well. But
Yeah. The worst part is when I was super nervous, like going in or whatever, when they had to put that shit over my mouth and fucking put me to sleep. I was like, yeah, okay, so like, tell me again what happens. They're like, yeah, we'll put this over. It'll take like 2 hours, whatever, dude. You'll be out maybe today, maybe tomorrow if it's bad. I was like, yeah, okay. I was there 1.5 weeks, dude.
Dude, what?
What the
Yeah,
fuck?
mine was super bad. I had collapsed intestines and paralyzed intestines at the same time.
The fuck?
Dude,
I
your
couldn't
body
eat anything.
actually has gone through the fucking. Dude.
Yeah, I was close dying,
What the
like
fuck?
straight up close. They didn't want to tell me, but I was like on my end, dude. I didn't eat for 1.5 weeks at all, not a single thing. It was crazy. Nuts. But now I'm here, dude. Hey, and now it's gone. It can't happen again.
True.
Yeah.
They were
Fuck
fighting
the
up here,
appendix.
weren't they? Yeah, they
All my
finished
homies hate
fighting.
appendix.
Ah,
Episodes,
little rat.
anyway.
Oh, he's not fat. He's.
He just said little rat, dude. And he got shit on.
Oh, he was riding the zippy, dude.
I'm taking the fucking car over.
Are they pushing?
Yep. Uh-oh.
Ah, I'm popping hot penis, dude.
Yo, open that bitch. Oh,
Where are they?
On the
nice.
other building.
Don't worry about me. I'm here. I just got pushed back, dude.
This kid's lagging.
Group.
He's on a million ping. Million ping.
Oh, 110. Why
1
does he
HP
have
Valk,
any
1 HP
weapon?
Valk.
Dude, this guy's
He has
skipping
any
through phase in
other
time.
weapon.
Ash is 1 HP. He's skipping through phase in time. Look at
He's
him.
so laggy. What is this?
Climbing.
What is that lag? I can't track him. He's teleporting everywhere.
You're telling me
this
I
guy-
had Eva and an R9.
Dude, if this guy had any other weapon, I'd smoke them.
Get
I
off
hate
the
any weapon.
McDonald's Wi-Fi, bitch. I'm reporting you.
McDonald's, what's wrong with that? Come on.
Come on, dude, he's playing on a Switch in the McDonald's bathroom right now.
He's playing from his McDonald's, dude.
Yeah. Just because you don't have a McDonald's close doesn't mean he doesn't have to, you know? Where's your closest McDonald's, RBR?
Like 10-minute drive.
Damn, cringe.
I live in a village.
Mine's like a 7-minute bike, dude. Dude,
Yeah,
what's
but I
with,
live in a
what's
village.
with pe- Yeah, but like, what's with Can we talk about what's with APAC people and playing energy weapons?
I don't know.
I don't know, man. I'll be back. I'm getting some fucking water, man.
The first game of LAN is gonna be a shit show, dude.
Yeah.
Cause it'll be like, what the fuck is happening? Like, 4 different meta clashes.
You know, I'm curious.
Treat me like the OG.
I'm curious to see like how NA is gonna adapt, because like my teammates think that like the other regions are gonna have a rude awakening, but I think it's the other way around.
I think NA is gonna have a bad time adapting to the EU at least.
I think so too, because we're such Gibby crutches that it's like we won't be able to pivot off of anything but Gibby, and other regions are so familiar on crypto that like you're either gonna adapt or die, and like that,
Well,
that's just how it is.
You want my honest opinion?
What?
I think the Edge playstyle will not work in LAN. That is
I
my
think it'll
prediction. I think it won't because $1 million, everyone's gonna be playing zone. Everyone's gonna be playing for points.
That's fine.
And then
That's actually better for Edge.
yeah, but it's better if there's other teams that you can kill on Edge. But what if there's no one to kill on Edge and you're running
no.
into 19 people holding the zone?
Then you're
And-
overlooted.
Yeah, but I know it's a very risky playstyle. I think for LAN.
Could be. I don't know. I think Edge will work. I think it's going to be really dependent on
Same, I
having
think
a
we'll
good
give
read
tier
on
one.
your lobby, though.
True, but I'm talking
Well,
about
it's
final
clear.
lobby. Like I'm talking about final. Like where we're playing for $1 million, you
Is
know.
it in the smoke? Yeah, I know. I just headshot that kid. Shit on. Throw in my face, make music. Uh-oh.
I think.
Kill me.
let's hope. Dead or one? Oh, there are enough there.
Bitch!
I also
don't-
feel like the game is so like the thing with BR too. Like if someone has like a crazy day or whatever, they can be fucking unstoppable too. No, like it can also like come down to like just like someone having a fucking nutty day, you know?
I can also bet that a lot of teams are gonna be nervous as fuck on LAN. Because a lot of them
yeah,
haven't
yeah.
experienced the LAN, and it's gonna be like you're just gonna be able to bully them because they're gonna choke under pressure.
That's why I'm pretty confident with my team, because 2 out of 3 of us have been to LAN.
I'm confident about all 3 of us except that, you know, my teammates sucked on their last LAN, but that's not their fault. They didn't have an IGL. I know that I activate online. On LAN, I am in a different fucking zone because the adrenaline starts hitting me really hard, and when the adrenaline starts hitting me really hard, I start calling like 10 times better. Aiming at
You see, that's the weird thing about me. Like, whenever I'm just like playing, like I can even be in ranked. Like my adrenaline is almost always going. It's really weird.
That's
Yeah,
crazy
for me.
because
It's annoying.
like I feel nothing when I sit and play this. It's like an empty void in my heart.
Yep.
It depends. Like if I'm not talking a lot like about random shit, my adrenaline's just going nuts. Like this session, it hasn't been like going at all, but typically like it's through the fucking roof.
Really?
Yeah.
I guess I've experienced a lot of it in my life that I'm kind of like immune now. I'll only get it online, and then one when it hits me, bro. Shush. When the adrenaline starts flowing through your body on LAN, on stage,
I think-
bro. That feeling
I
is
think
You
like,
like-
I think like when you walk up to stage and shit, you like, boom, it hits you. You know, you're like, damn,
Yeah,
it's us right now.
that's when
Did
you
you-
like lock in. You're like, all right, boys.
Manny, did you play on main stage or only on side stage?
We played main stage every time we played,
Oh shit.
but we didn't play that much, so
how many games did you all play online?
I don't remember.
All 3 there.
75 one guy. The 2 rounds or whatever.
Only
Also-
2?
I don't remember. We got smoked the first one, and then we got smoked on the one after.
I like how Nuke
Yeah,
said
we
he was good IGL.
We had Celia in our group. That just
Oh,
puts
yeah.
everything. Didn't go fuck.
In the corner. I died.
Holy shit. it's
This guy's
fucking-
fucking control looting.
That's a whole different team. On that.
Yeah, I know. I knocked one.
Oh shit, it's 2 teams.
What? How's he not dead?
He is knocked. I knocked him, bro.
Oh.
Alright, I got smoked. Okay, nice.
I'm hitting low ball.
Hide each other, you. Port me,
There's
man.
another team here, Mandy. We gotta hit the digital dash, bro.
Of course, this guy hits 105 with a triple dip. Of course, I wouldn't.
Oh, to that side. If they push us, we fuck them.
Oh yeah.
What's that? That sounds like on us.
What the fuck? Oh, another team, dude.
Alright, I'm gonna put a portal here. I don't think you
Dude,
get.
I'm fucking dead, dude.
Are they on you?
Yeah, yeah.
No,
There's a
no,
guy
no,
taking
no,
your
no.
portal right now. I literally saw the raid.
Oh. Dude, I'm stuck!
Dude, the forklift is fucking you.
The forklift. Oh, that was behind, but fuck it, dude.
Damn.
Good push there, Savage. That was pretty good. And you get a free res. Damn.
Molding, or are you a little bit mad?
Oh, that's a pretty good push.
Seriously? No.
I'm gonna rip one more, and then I gotta hit the sleep.
You wanna hit the sleep soon?
Yeah, I woke up at like 6 p.m. yesterday.
I'm down for one more, and then I go work hard. I know you're tired as well.
Me?
Yeah.
Oh yeah, but I'm drinking G Fuel right now.
Oh. Well, I for sure gotta go work out. That's one thing I will never slack on anymore. Working out. Chat spamming workout glad. Chat, we all gotta work out together. Come on, when I go work out, every one of you motherfuckers go work out as well.
Do a workout, Streamline.
I can't. I don't have the facilities for that big man.
Damn. Put gym vlogs on Twitter.
But it's almost 12 a.m. Motherfuckers, are you guys on new schedule or what? Ring Fit stream, that would be too easy.
Dude, it's only 40 teams at the tourney, right?
Yeah.
It's not more.
No.
What's the last chance qualifiers then?
Championship.
Oh, the championship?
Yeah.
Oh my god. Alright, let's go.
But that doesn't make sense.
No.
How does that make sense?
How does it not make sense? Please explain how it doesn't make sense.
They have last chance qualifier for championship, but we don't get a
Wait.
spot in the championship.
Gemma isn't going to LAN, right?
Bro, Mande, if you don't qualify through playoffs, then you go into the last chance qualifier. How does it not make sense?
Yeah, but like,
What?
we don't have a spot for the big tournament, right?
No, unless you qualify. If you do really well in playoffs, in our
Yeah.
case 2 playoffs, then you earn points to qualify for championship. If you qualify
Yeah.
in points, you're in. If you don't, you're going to LCQ. They instantly go to LCQ. They don't have a chance of qualifying through points.
Ah, like that. Yeah, okay.
There's two over here by that setting.
90 on one guy.
Hello, my friend.
Knocked. Oh, old Mandy's back there.
Open the door, bitch. You good there? You need me?
Yeah, he's one.
Nice.
Yeah, it's explained a little bit bad, but like.
No, because like, there's no way. Yeah, we go. So, let's just say we go out and do bad in the LAN, right?
Then
We go
play
to
with
last chance qualifiers too, right?
Yeah.
Okay. But there'll be more playoffs throughout the day, or is this the last one?
Nope, this is the last playoff of this year.
Oh, it is?
Of this, yeah.
We'll split, yeah.
Shit.
Of this,
But
like,
LAN.
Not of this year. It's of this season.
of this season, yeah,
I
no,
think.
not a year. So,
Yeah, so we'll have 2 more playoffs, and then we'll have LAN at the end of the year, right?
No, what are you smoking, dude? Listen to me. We have this playoff right now in May. And then this summer, we're gonna have championship, probably like July or some shit, right? I don't know when it's gonna be.
Ah, okay.
And then the season ends, and then we wait for announcement of next season, and then the Pro League starts again.
Yeah, I understand. I thought that just because I thought what's it called? I thought the LAN was at I thought the LAN was gonna be at
Get it out of your mouth, bro. Holy shit.
No, I'm just gonna
Knocked one.
91 got here. 91 got here.
Goodbye.
That last guy with his 9v, white armor. No, I thought the LAN was in December. That's why I was confused that there's no way this is the last. We have to wait like 6 months.
No, it's last LAN was also during summer. Or like last championship was during summer.
Alright, I understand now.
Well, last championship we played like June or something, but this time obviously it's gonna be a little bit later.
I griefed. Help.
Oh, he needs help.
Help!
86 on the rock team.
I got him.
No.
Ice on my neck like I'm chosen.
PK is better on Wraith. But Mastiff is better on, what's it called? On,
Mastiff is crazy on rate as well.
Yeah, but PK is better.
I don't think so.
You're just like, you're so much faster on Wraith, dude.
No, but like,
Nothing about
you get an extra bullet with the Mastiff. Imagine you go in a bubble fight first and you have 6 bullets instead of 5. Like, you're just smoking.
You guys think Val Crypto Watson is gonna work on LAN?
No. I think those teams are gonna get bullied. If I see a Watson Gen
so
in
as well.
fences, I'm smoking them, dude. I don't give a fuck. They have no escape. I'm just smoking them. What are they gonna crypto ult me? No, I'll break the Gen, I give ult them, and they're done. What are they gonna do? Like, same with Bangalore teams. Bangalore works in certain situations. But most of the times when a Bangalore team tries to hold any kind of high ground over us, we are Gibby ulting, Ash portaling on them and taking their fucking shit. Every single time.
You're assuming it's a Bangalore without a Gibby.
Yeah. I mean,
Yeah,
they
they
play
play
Bangalore.
that Neo.
Yeah, we don't play that in an A. We play Bangalore and Gibby together. I'm being flown on.
Okay, I don't know why you guys play Bangalore and Gibby. That's funny.
Double airstrike, bang ult to get the bubble, and then you Gibby ult once the bubble's down. We're really big on using tools to like get someone's bub, and then using our second tool to actually capitalize on the bub being down.
Holy shit. You got the triple tick.
Which you think would make us use crypto, but it doesn't.
Yeah, I mean, then you should, if you wanna use bang Gibby, why not just use crypto Gibby?
Because of visual clutter as well on bang.
So hit 25.
I hit the guy 25. You got that, Mac?
Of course.
Yeah, no. Every time we see a team without a Gibby, I think it's a mistake because we just Gibby ult them and we take their shit. Like if they're holding a good spot, we are 100% going to be fucking taking their shit every single time. I think it's a mistake not to run Gibby, and I think on LAN it will hurt a lot because if teams that run Gibby are smart, they're gonna bully the shit out of the team that they're not running Gibby. And I can understand, oh, Watson Gen is good, it like blocks nades and shit. If I get an angle on that Watson Gen, that shit's dead, and then we're ulting.
How do you feel about Val Gibby Watson?
Well, Gibby Watson could be good, but I don't see a reason to play Watson.
Shield economy, like it basically would enable you to play early with a semi-fighting comp. It's shield economy
play
and it
Loba,
allows you
man.
to stall. I
Play
know,
Loba
but
then.
it also allows you to stall your bub. You just place
Okay,
reactive
thank you for 6
Watson
months.
gens,
Welcome
and
back.
you have a lot of ult cells. Theoretically, you have a lot of ult
Yeah,
cells.
theoretically.
I think
but how are you
theoretically everything could work.
how are you gonna get that loot? You know. I
You
think
play edge and play for a spot on zone 3.
if you're running, if you wanna run
You're
like
running
an early
before you
zone,
die, though.
don't run Watson and run fucking Loba, dude. And Loba, you just wait with shit loot and then you just fucking Loba loot everything. In my opinion, that's way better.
That's true.
A comp I think could be crazy is Bangalore Ash Gibby. You say fuck the zone knowledge or whatever, and you just fucking
For LAN,
you just
fuck
do some
no.
bunch of crit shit. Not for LAN, but just like in general, I feel like it's not a bad comp.
If you play without beacon
same-
on LAN, rip, you know. In my opinion.
Same playstyle as like Wraith Gibby Caustic back in the day, right?
Yeah, dude.
Yeah.
Gibby Ash Caustic could be crazy too.
I just don't see a reason to play without beacon in this day and age when there's so many good characters that give beacon. And I feel like it's just like a handicap to not give yourself zone knowledge.
I mean, to be honest, like, I think that just depends on where you land.
A lot of people like also feel like zone knowledge is pog and shit, like figure out where you're going to play next. But let's just say you're not like, you're just like, oh, we see zone 3. Oh, this spot is good. We go look, there's someone playing it, we have to fight for it. And you just fight for it no matter what. Boom,
Yeah.
take that. And then you take the spot. And then you see next zone, oh, zone
but
4,
that's
I
such
want to
a-
play here.
Such a riskier
Well,
way
it's
of
a slate.
playing that you're
Yeah.
literally putting your entire game on 1 or 2 fights. Like if you lose the fight, 0 points.
That's how
if you
NA
win the
plays.
fight, if you lose the
Yeah.
fight, 0 points. If you win the fight, you have a chance at winning. Fuck me if I'm playing like that. I'm playing the secure style where I can give myself room to breathe and not having to gamble my entire game on 1 fight.
That is
Yeah,
literally how. That's
understandable.
literally how my team plays.
Yeah.
We play ring. We'll get zone 3, and then we'll just look for God spot and be like, all right, if there's a team here, they die.
Yeah, and what
Yeah,
if they
but
don't
It
die?
works. It worked. Well, then we suck. We didn't hit our shots. It works for us the majority of the time because we're just
Yeah,
like,
but
because of how like top heavy NA is. It works on LAN. I don't think it'll work.
yeah, online I think I mean, just the EU teams that qualified for LAN, every single one of them are capable of winning this tournament. You know,
Yeah, and NA I'd say like half are capable,
Yeah,
if that.
about 5 or 6.
I just think we haven't played it with each other and against each other in so long that we can't really like put a finger on it.
Well, we
I feel
can
like it's
gauge.
such a dumb debate always.
We can gauge, and also I want to say, if you're pushing APAC North teams, like they might not be the best in zone knowledge and shit. Those motherfuckers are cracked out of their mind, man. Those are not gonna be easy fucking fights.
Yeah.
Oh, no,
Even
no.
though they play Valk Crypto Watson, like they.
Yeah, they're gonna
they
do a
be
lot of
moving.
damage to you. Dude,
They
it's
be
not gonna be.
fucking
It's not
moving.
gonna be free. It's not gonna be free at all.
Yeah. I mean, it
Ooh,
was like
oh,
that's the old
tier
line,
one,
right?
thank
Like you
you.
saw a Korean team and you were like,
Oh, dude,
oh
hey.
shit, like
What's
they're aping, like
I had Wyvern in my team.
yeah, they
We
just
died to
aped
them
everything.
all fucking games.
Yeah, they were
They're like-
known for being like the ape squads. They would just send
Oh
you.
my cover.
They saw us for 2 seconds, dude.
fearless.
Sell team. They literally saw us for 2 seconds in the building. Boom, they just aped instantly. Double kick the doors and quadruple arc start. It was like, oh, okay, fuck it. I guess we.
Yeah, actually, yeah.
I guess that was a fight, dude. Bog.
Yeah, I mean,
I just remember back in the day, the meta, people would be on your door and you're like, what are they doing? And they're just kicking your door. You're just like, what are you doing? Why are you doing
You
this?
know what? There's one mechanic I'm so happy they removed. That is arc star sticking your
Stop your
teammates.
chat.
Yeah.
Holy
Chat.
shit,
Dude,
that's
I-
metal
stop.
ass.
It
Chat,
was
you've
ass,
been
but I
requested
loved
to
being
stop.
the one that would get stuck and grapple up into a team.
Yeah.
That shit was
And
the
you're
highlight
like-
of my day.
You
What it
fucking
actually
you crack 3 of them or something, and you're like, oh, we just want to fight instantly.
Well, we just
People do that in
3-2-1 and
EU.
double stick me, and I would just jump up.
people did that Neo. We would triple stick a guy.
That is low.
The first one would break the door, and the two others would just roll people.
He's behind the captain. What is that cube? Dude, he threw me off almost with that thing, dude.
Do we have any idea when the multi-region scrims are gonna happen?
I know we're gonna try and post some in boot camp.
Oh yeah, in bootcamp that'll be fucking amazing.
These guys are pushing, by
Yeah,
the way.
our
Turn
ass
around,
is
turn
being
around.
our ass is being fucked right now.
I one cooked one.
Your mom?
Dude, blood's one. Literal 1 HP. 22, 99, 77. Please,
Where is he?
please! On me! In my ass!
Oh, in
He's
your
right here.
asshole?
Literal 1 health. He's right there. He's behind the pillar.
Here.
Literal
I
1
missed
HP.
him.
Come to me now, come to me now.
He's one.
Oh, we need it.
Fuck yard.
I got third dead. He popped the bat.
Are they taking it?
I don't
Yeah.
know. Yes. Okay.
Perfect.
You can raise. You can
I'm
raise.
popping this. Yeah. I'm gonna drop you my armor.
They're
okay?
getting thirded. They didn't have a back.
Drop my armor. Look.
Find him.
Take it.
No. You're same HP. What's the about?
Yeah, but it's a good fucking, it's a good thing. I pop a bat and you pop a medkit, we're fine.
You're a great teammate, but no.
Fuck you, dude.
My banner now, bitches. I'm on the port. Why are you playing scout on raid? What are you
Shut up.
smoking?
100?
10!
I lied. 100 now.
Fucking raises brain cell. You're healthy. Is that someone in the tunnel behind you, Mande?
No.
Yes, it is! Oh, he's not. Dude, what the fuck? Yo, my banner now.
I thought I hit 500, dude.
My banner now? Now?
I'm in that shit, baby.
Your mom, dude. What is that?
I'm not hitting anything.
We gotta use bombs.
Well, it hit me.
No bombs. Did they just fuck off completely?
I think so.
Fuck
They
off.
did.
I thought I hit for 100, dude. But that was 10. I was like 100? Never
Oh, I
mind.
just slurped the fuck out of your box, bro.
I slipped the fuck out of everyone right here. It was good.
Ah. Alright.
Motherfucker said, why are you playing Scout on Wraith, dude? This guy is not.
Go by 3 I want. I'll take
This
that.
guy is not.
No.
What is he not?
This guy is not.
He
He is
said
not.
no.
I'm Christopher Columbus of Apex, dude.
You're
I discover new shit all the time.
Okay.
You're Dumbo of Apex, dude. With the big fucking big ass ears.
I'll show
flying
you.
away.
Just look. Literally just look, dude. Alright, I'll show you the power of the Scout on Wraith.
How would you guys feel if they added a melee weapon to the game?
I think it would be pretty cool, but it would be fucking OP.
Not like a one-hit kill, but like maybe it like banged off doors real quick, like one-hit doors. And you could like knock you back from the door.
Wasn't there a
character?
character supposed to be that smacks the fucking door in one hit?
I don't
Yeah.
know.
Yeah.
I'm thinking like a fucking gravity hammer, you know, like from Halo. You pull up, just doof, and they
Yeah, I
go
don't know
flying
about
back
that,
from
man.
the door.
I'm real with you. I don't know about all
Wait,
that.
they buffed the double tap.
Wait, is it crazy?
Dude, hey, they picked this up. Try and double
What is
tap.
this?
It
What the
doesn't
fuck is
move.
this?
What the fuck?
Oh, is it like all double
Oh my
tap?
god!
It's like
Yo!
all double tap. Scout is now
Dude.
worth picking up.
I'm confiscating this.
Oh, what? Oh, yeah, I have a gold bag. Fuck you. I ain't picking that shit up. I ain't giving that.
That's fine.
Oh my
It's you who will
god.
suffer for that, not me.
Wait, where's my light mag there?
Oh, I got Kraber, fuck!
I ain't helping you.
I'm getting Kraber, dude.
110? 110.
110, baby.
He has a crab. I'm pushing.
Of course you are.
Yeah.
That's a sick cue from me. I'm popping on right now.
I'm lagging.
Who the fuck smoked here? We're pushing this, right? Yup. Pop it, pop it, pop it, pop it, pop it, pop it.
I used my bub.
Go back, Pog. I'll rip half of my meds now. That was a good bait though. That was a good bait
I'm
from
dead.
him.
I'm dead. I'm dead. I'm
Oh,
dead.
hang on,
We gotta give it it.
That's it.
Bubble, 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 bubble.
Dude, I can't move. I can't move. He already used it.
I'm
Rest,
holding
rest,
his
rest,
back.
Rest.
Wait, dumbass.
I got fucking Krabered.
Rest.
Shut up, man.
Push me.
I'm trying.
Like 1,000 damage.
Nice.
And then I got Kraber headshot.
I got fucking arc starred, naded, Krabered, and fire naded, dude. What the fuck do you want? He's
He's
one
up
barrel
there.
shot away from dying. No, he's not, is he?
He is. Look
Yes.
at. He has got an orange crib, like you know the
He's
fucking.
gonna die. He's gonna die.
Look some mates for me, dude.
They're in front of us. Fucking shooting nothing.
What is that head glitch? That is disgusting.
I can't even see him.
We're dead.
Hey, dude. Maybe I'll go right side around. You can't do that?
Round
Oh,
4?
never mind.
You have heat shield?
That would be crazy. I do.
We could go around with heat shield.
100. Knocked.
I'm coming. Don't die, don't
100.
die.
Push. He's solo up top.
Oh, he's above, dude. Ah! I gotta heal.
No.
Ah! He's above you, Use my shield,
I got the fucking slow thing.
I'm walking up.
The self-first thing. The fucking
He already
self-first.
self-resed. I'm blocking hundreds. Dude.
Winnable.
10 inches deep in your fucking mom, dude. How's that 10? Oh, dude. Now he's dead.
I need confirmation now. Earlier you said 2 inches, now you're 10 inches deep in his mom. I'm
Holy
getting
shit,
mixed
how did I
signals.
hit 10?
I need to know what I need to be prepared for.
How's that 10, dude?
Okay. That was a solid LG, except for the part where I got Krabered in the fucking face.
We all got Krabered.
I also got Krabered.
Our brother got Krabered, I TP'd him out. Wrestler, I got Krabered. I get TP'd out, and you got Krabered right after.
And I'm just fucking dead. No TP for me, because I'm
Oh
giddy.
my god.
Good sesh. Tomorrow I'm getting on. Oh, tomorrow we have tournament, right? Fuck. 10 a.m. right?
Yeah,
10
what
a.m.
about tonight, I guess.
We're gonna wake up at 8 in the morning?
Fuck, I'm waking up.
Yeah, I'll
9:30,
be up
bro.
at 3. I gotta wake up at like 5 p.m. for a Lost Ark turn. Have the
Oh,
Apex
dude,
tournament
I'm
today.
setting like 2 alarms for 9 a.m. I'm gonna die. It's just not happening. This is just not happening. Dude, do you think we get dropped from our own if we oversleep our own tournament?
Oh, dude, no. I'll just say I fell.
That'd be funny.
Broke my leg.
You
Alright.
fell.
Yeah.
I'm out of here, boys.
Thanks for playing,
Yeah.
guys.
I'll
Later,
just
later.
Peace.
Peace. Alright, chat. Thank you for watching all the subs and stuff. I'm gonna host Dito. Gotta go work out. I'll see you guys tomorrow for the tournament. Look at redeems. What the fuck is happening with redeems? What? New VIP? Who? Who mega lol? Golfarian, how did you get 750k? What the fuck is wrong with you? Fucking weirdo. Alright, there you go. Alright, guys, go say hi to Dito. Thank you guys for watching. I'll see you guys tomorrow. Alright, peace out. Everyone join the fucking raid and spam emotes. Also, Uni has done our first 4 animated emotes. She's illustrated them and they look fucking sick. You guys are gonna love them. They're being animated right now. But yeah, the new emotes look sick. They're gonna be done soon. Join the fucking raid. What are you guys waiting for? Join the fucking raid now. And everyone spam hearts in Dito's fucking channel. Alright. Peace out. See you guys soon. Bye bye.